Super. Okay. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining. I know it's a week where many people are already maybe moving into holiday mode. Uh, I'm with my family down my in-laws in Santiago, Chile today, but happy to be joining you all. So we've got a really big agenda. Um, as usual, we are we're all here on one big Zoom meeting, both members of the Vermont Climate Council and those who are observing and joining us today. And we love that. And today we're going to need to just remind ourselves our sort of Zoom etiquette that we try to do is while we're having a Climate Council meeting, we try to, if you're in a place to keep your camera on and you're a member of Vermont Climate Council, we encourage you to do that. If you're not, that's fine too. If you're a member of the public or just observing our meeting today, not as a climate counselor, we encourage you to keep your camera off while the council's having conversations. And then when we do some significant public comment we'll do today, obviously we encourage you to put your camera on if you can, if you're a member of the public. And thanks everyone for staying muted as we go today. All right, so we have an agenda. Maybe Jane or Cameron, if someone could share the screen with that agenda, that would be really helpful. I'm having a little technical glitch today of not being able to open up those documents on the server. So if one of the two of you could pop that up. Thank you, Jane. Okay. So we have our usual business of we gotta approve some minutes before we get going. We want to spend a moment to welcome some new counselors and the ones that have joined us in the fall. And so we're going to do a moment of just sort of welcoming and letting folks introduce themselves. And that's the first thing we're going to do. Then we're going to jump right in to substance. The biomass counselor writing group had circulated around a revised draft based on the notes from our last meeting as a council, both the public input and the counselor notes. And so we're going to be reviewing that. We have a structure for reviewing that. And if you scroll down just a little bit, Jane, if you don't mind. Yeah. So hold on right there. So that sort of like 1 through 5 bullet is a suggestion about how we're going to handle that conversation where we just spend, 20 minutes or so, maybe a little bit more, talking about what's changed in the documents since the last time we've seen it and having a little discussion. Then we open up for public comment and see how much we need to do. We budgeted up to a half-hour public comment if we need it. Then come back as a council and say, what, if anything, needs to be adapted to this new document. We have a little conversation about that. We put some, if there are specific suggested changes, we'll put those on the table. And then we'll have a moment to have some formal decision-making on potential revisions and then on the overall document. So that's what we're going to do with biomass. And it's a little confusing the way it's written there, but if you can just keep scrolling down, Jane, if you don't mind. And we'll finish up biomass in a break around noonish. We come back, we have a couple things to hit. We have fairly quick hits on those. We're going to look at what the Rural Resilience Adaptation Subcommittee has done in response to the request from the speaker, the Vermont House. We're going to hear from the transportation and the group in the cross-sector subcommittee about some specific recommendations there. We're going to hear from Jane about a draft legislative report. And then we have a really quick hit on a 2-sentence or 1-sentence change to our governance document to clarify how subcommittee chairs are selected. And then the last thing we have on the agenda is about an update on the Climate Action Office with a particular focus on the engagement that's happening, and particularly engagement that has a equity-infused lens. So there is a risk that we're not going to get to all this, right? And so what our commitment at the start is, we're going to end the meeting at 2 because we're going to lose a lot of people at 2. And if we don't get to some of that stuff at the end, we're just going to have to push that to our January meetings. So that's what we're suggesting as a pathway on the agenda. And before we do that, I'll just do a quick check are folks comfortable with this agenda and comfortable with our backup plan of, if for whatever reason we can't get to these final items, we're going to just push those to January and we're not going to extend our meeting beyond 2 p.m. Any quick feedback on that agenda before we dive into it? Looking good? Okay, super. All right, so, and Secretary Clauser, anything else on your end that you'd like to highlight before we get going?
No, I think we're all set. As you said, it's a busy agenda today, so we'll jump right in. Thanks.
Super. Okay. Minutes from the last meeting. We'll be using those minutes today, so it'll be helpful. Any concerns with those minutes? Anybody need a little more time to review them? Okay. Last chance for any concerns for the minutes before we treat them as approved? Okay, not seeing or hearing any of those concerns. Let's treat those as approved. Thanks so much. And we're going to use those today as we talk about the updates to the biomass recommendations. Okay, so let us welcome some new members. And Jane, can you help us with this? And I'm just looking on the screen who is here. Yeah, I see some. Jane, could you help us lead, just let folks introduce themselves?
Sure. Thanks so much. So you'll all remember that the Senate appointments were up this fall. Sue Minter transitioned off a bit early and said a farewell at our last meeting to all of you via a letter that she sent all of you. Abby Corse, our farm and forest rep, and Lauren Oates, who represented Resilience, are both transitioned off at the end of October as well. So we have 3 new Senate appointments this year. Denise Bailey, who's taking Sue Minter's seat, who is the Director of Equity. I won't get her full title, so I'll let her introduce herself, but works as the Director of Equity, as well as some other things at Capstone as well. Allie Webster, who's an energy planner with the Northeast RPC, is also joining us and took Lauren's seat around resilience. And then Jael Pulskamp is our new farm and forest rep, who's also joining us today. So I'll let the 3 of them introduce themselves, and also wanted to note that Commissioner Winters has transitioned off, and Dr. Mark Levine will be taking his spot. That is a seat represented by the Secretary of Human Services, so that is now a designee to Dr. Mark Levine, who's the Health Commissioner, as well as Eric Forand, who has been on some steering committee meetings, but I believe this is his first Climate Council meeting, and he is a designee of the Commissioner of Public Safety, as Eric Borneman was as well. So 5 new counselors with us today, and appreciate any words that they might want to say, introducing themselves and why they chose to serve.
Great. No particular order. On my screen, Allie, I see you're at the top there, if you want to jump in.
Sure. Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Allie Webster, she, hers. I am an energy planner with the Northeastern Vermont Development Association, which does regional planning and economic development for the Northeast Kingdom. And I'm looking forward to serving in this capacity and making sure that the Northeast Kingdom is well represented and learning from you all. So thanks for having me.
Super. Thanks, Allie. So great to have you here. Jael?
Hi, everyone. My name is Jael Pulskamp. Just pronouncing it so everyone can get it.
Thank you.
It's okay if you mispronounce it. I'm used to that. Yeah, so I'm an organic vegetable grower in Worcester, and I'm really happy to be here. I had a really hard growing season. I lost my crops, so it's very apropos that I'm now on this committee working on these issues. So thank you for having me, and I look forward to being here.
Thanks, Jael. I'm sorry to hear that. Sounds really rough. Who's up next? I'm not seeing videos on, so in my screen, I don't have my usual screen set up, so I can't. If who else is here from the new counselors?
I don't see any of the other ones, David, but we'll look forward. I know they all accepted, and especially Denise Bailey, who's the new legislative appointment. She did accept and corresponded, so hopefully she'll join us shortly.
Great. Okay. Super. So maybe, Jane, if you can help me keep an eye out for folks, and as they join, we might create a little space to let people say hi. That sound good? Okay, great. All right. So let's dive in. As you see on the agenda, the idea was to spend the first 20 minutes or so of this conversation on the revised biomass recommendations, really looking at what happened in the document, and walking through what the council writer group did. Bram, excuse me, was voluntold a little bit by his fellow writers to be the one to do this. And so, Bram, let me turn it over to you. And I'm happy to pull up on the screen, or ask Jane maybe to pull up on the screen, the notes from the last meeting, which really were what guided us, along with some individual counselor comments. Like Joey sent in some comments as well, for instance. And happy to pull up the document with in track change or not in track change, as you wish, Bram, to help illustrate what's happened since this group last met.
Yeah, I thought we'd look at the track changes versions, and we can then just concentrate on what was changed and move through this expeditiously.
Sure, that's great. So Jane, if I could ask your help with that, and if you're...
I'll be on it in 1 second, just toggling
Okay.
between screens, so it takes me a minute, but.
Okay, great.
And, I will just, first of all, say welcome, Ali and Jael. Wonderful to have you. And, sort of 3 words of background on biomass, which is there was a biomass task group which spent many months and had presentations from many experts. And as this document says, what that all showed was how complex this issue is. There are 5 main criteria by which we judge proposed recommendations or proposals to not change things, which are CO2 emissions, cost effectiveness, technical possibility, feasibility, social justice, and co-benefits. And all of those come into play when one is looking at the subject of biomass. And this is specifically as it says in the title, which we clarified because it was important, specifically the use of biomass for the generation of electricity in Vermont. There are 2 big biomass electric generating plants in Vermont, McNeil and Reigate. And the biomass task group, I think really struggled because there were some members of that task group. The reason that the council did not accept the recommendations and asked the writing group to incorporate the feedback into the document that you now see. There were members who felt that the evidence and data presented to them made it clear that we should end biomass electric generation in Vermont. There were other members who felt that while the presentations had made clear some of the high emissions and particulate matter and potential negative impacts to the forests, what was not clear was the implications. If we address sort of the negatives of biomass electric generation, what about the positive goods that biomass electric generation does for Vermont? What happens if we lose those? Do we have a way to substitute for those? Do we have a way to address and mitigate the loss of the good things? And among those, the good things that biomass electric generation provides is kind of reliable around the clock, around the year, low cost electricity that is local and supports the local economies through jobs in forestry and logging and trucking and the biomass plants. And if we do find ways to address those issues, there are also sort of complicated issues as to are we exporting any of those harms? If we, sort of makes Vermont cleaner if we take certain actions, but for instance, will we be importing more electricity from generating plants outside the state that either use fossil fuels and have impacts on their local communities, or will biomass continue to be harvested as it is, but shipped greater distances to biomass electric generating plants in other states? So, looking kind of beyond our borders to New England and to the atmosphere of the planet as a whole. So I think that's addresses the changes we made in the name of the title of this document. And I will, as I said, just scrolling on my own screen, recognizing that my screen isn't yours, and that I need to ask Jane, are you controlling the screen? Yeah. Okay. So if, Jane, if you could scroll down to the first comment that's just down right there. This, some of what we did was simply editing where we felt that points were repetitive or had been made elsewhere and did not need to be repeated. The fact that maintaining forested land as forest does help support forest-based carbon sequestration. Just was a clean it up and tighten it up. Forested land does what it does, and we didn't feel we needed to reiterate that. And we also, just at the bottom of this page, a lot of the requests from counselors and from the public were for documentation and references for some of the assertions made here. So you will see footnotes. I believe that each of the places where anyone asked for a reference or documentation, I believe we have addressed that and put in the references. And I think we can scroll down to right here. Thank you. So what point 1 said in the last version of this was emits meaningful amounts of CO2, and what the definition of meaningful is not precise. That's a somewhat subjective description. So, reaching into the presentations that the Biomass Task Group had received, we sort of defined meaningful, took the word out and defined it as quantities comparable to fossil fuels. And a bit of wordsmithing in point 3 there. We hadn't said negative impacts, and this is examples of harms. There may be positive impacts, which also were discussed in the Biomass Task Group. The fact that some of our forests are fairly uniform in age and species because they have grown up in previously clear-cut lands from a century ago, and that there are possible positive impacts to selectively harvesting and getting a mix of ages and a mix of species in the forests. This particularly addresses the potential negative impacts on forest ecosystems. And, the next sort of section is really asking a series of questions, and the recommendation, which this all addresses. This is the first bullet point of recommendation 1. The Biomass Task Group's original recommendation was to study these issues further, and as I said, there was sort of some uncertainty around whether it should state that the study should figure out how we phase out biomass electric generation, or whether we should. And if so, how? So these recommendations, again, are, we adjusted the focus of the information and the things that we want to learn so that we can make a good decision about this and a good decision about what we as a council want to recommend. And, it's really trying to answer a lot of the questions that I mentioned earlier, which is we understand the CO2 emissions, and if we find a substitute with lower emissions, what happens to? And then there's a long list of things that we are concerned about. One is the reliability, the round the clock, round the year reliability, and the affordability, and the safety of biomass, along with adequacy and sustainability. So are there substitutes? What would replace the 7% of Vermont's electricity that we currently get from biomass? Where would that come from, and what are the implications for emissions and for reliability and affordability? It mentions here in the blue, the larger blue section that you see, the fact that biomass provides base load, again, round the clock, round the year, round the calendar. There are some questions in the data. How one accounts for biomass emissions varies a bit from state to state, whether it's included in the state's inventory, whether it is defined as renewable or not. These things vary from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. So, we do want to make sure that what Vermont does doesn't negatively impact our ability to compare our emissions with those of other states. We want to make sure we understand how we're counting and how other states are counting, so that we're really looking at fair comparables. And I think we can scroll to the next page. One of the things that I think we all recognize the value of forests, and there are some cases in which the harvesting of biomass provides income to landowners, and some concern that in some cases the loss of that income may cause the landowner to be unable or unwilling to continue to maintain the land as forest and look to other uses. So, how can, if that income source diminishes or disappears for landowners, what are the other measures that the state can take to support the goals of maintaining the forest current size and coherence, and avoiding deforestation and fragmentation? And I think we can scroll down a couple of bullet points here.
Some of these are just minor wording changes, right, Bram?
Yeah, absolutely. Some of them are minor wording changes, agreed. So I think, adding the health of the forest in addition to the resilience of the forest, just to complete the picture. And again, looking at both the positive, making sure we understand the positive and the negative impacts and implications of whatever decision we should make. And the second recommendation, those were all bullet points under the first recommendation, to make sure we understand all those things fully and undertake a study to do so. And the second recommendation is while we are figuring out whether or not electric biomass generation of electricity is going to be a long-term part of Vermont's energy profile or not, let's not add new electric-led biomass generation facilities. However, if there are applications to create new facilities, what we added to the previous draft is, let's make sure that before we build a new facility, we've addressed all the concerns listed above. So those are the changes, and I'm 1 minute behind schedule, so I will stop there.
Great. Thanks, Bram. No, I think that's really helpful. And just if folks go through the meeting summary from last meeting and the public comment, and then your counselor comments, you'll see those changes are reflecting what you saw, at least some of them, trying to be attentive to those comments. Okay. So what I wanted to do quick before going to public comment, we are a little bit behind, but if we just do a couple minutes, if counselors have a question about what happened in the counselor writing group process, now's a great time to ask that question. And then we'll go to public comment for a little bit, and we'll come back and really wrestle with any changes you all need to see to that document before we go for an overall yes or no on it. But counselors, any questions about what happened when Bram and the others who were in that little writing group were working, or what's on this new draft? Clarifying questions? Anything? Allie?
Thank you. Yes. Appreciate you running us through that. And I'm definitely still getting caught up on everything. I was just curious if I do see it clearly that the recommendation does not want to see any new facilities. I was wondering if previous discussions or versions, there was any comment on investing or expanding existing electric-led biomass facilities.
Yeah, we did. In earlier discussions, we talked about, and we talked about the fact that investments in existing facilities, sort of no one objected to investments in existing facilities that increase their efficiency. If you can produce more power with the same amount of wood, or reduced emissions with the same amount of electricity coming out, those are investments that are great to make. In terms of expanding, specific investments to expand the footprint or capacity, we did talk about them a lot. I think they are not addressed in this memo, as I recall.
Right.
Oh, there
It's
is,
not, yeah.
a couple bullet points up. There is, the study will ask, are there other ways to increase the efficiency of existing biomass facilities and their emissions implications? So we sort of glancingly reference it there.
Right. And Bram, if I might, so it's, as Bram's referencing, it's where around the study, there's some questions about that, right? What does efficiency look like? And specifically, if you're looking at, say, district heat and that kind of thing, like what are the pathways for that heating? If you'll see some language in the study. What this group didn't do was sort of take a position of this, for the things that are on the table right now, not taking a position on any of that. Does that make sense, Allie?
Yep. Thank you. That's helpful.
Okay. Other clarifying questions for the group? Okay. Great. So just as a reminder, what we're going to do is we'll do some public comment now, and then we're going to come back and see if there's anything that counselors want to make as sort of suggested revisions, and then we'll make some decisions around those. But we thought it'd be helpful to actually do some public comment first before all of that process. So members of the public, this is going to be a good time to weigh in. We know there's a lot of interest in this topic. Because we've got a pretty full meeting, we need to make decisions. I'm going to be a little less loosey-goosey this time about time. And so we're going to really aim for 2 minutes, a maximum 3 minutes comments today. And I'll help you all keep track of that. In fact, I was in the spirit of being South America, I was going to go for a soccer metaphor of like, I'll give you a heads up when it's 2 minutes, and I'll give you a real heads up when it's 3 minutes. So that's how I'll be letting folks know that we're getting to the we're keeping on track for public comment. I just, as is usual, if you'd like to make a comment, use your Zoom hand raise feature. It's down at the bottom. There's usually 3 little dots and or reactions tab. And from the reactions tab, there's a little raise hand. If you're having a hard time with that, drop in the chat that you'd like to get in the queue. It's also okay to do a comment in the chat this time. If you'd rather just write something up, feel free to use the chat as a place to do that. And thanks everyone for sticking with us on the time limits today. I know we haven't been as strict on that practice. I'm just going to try that today. I'll just keep track of my phone. I'll give you the little soccer metaphor as we're going. All right. So Richard Hopkins, you're up first in my queue. So please go ahead.
Yeah, good morning. For clarity, I was a member of the original biomass task group. The point I want to make here is that if you all decide that the non-greenhouse gas issues are paramount, that the issues that are listed as pros of burning wood to generate electricity in the report, if you decide that those are the deciding factors in the end, then you need to figure out where else you can make the greenhouse gas savings that you're not making by prohibiting the burning of wood to make electricity. Thanks.
Thanks, Richard. Really helpful. Yep. Nick, you're up next in my list.
Thank you. Can you all hear me?
Yep, answer you. Thanks, Nick.
Great, great. I submitted some written comments late yesterday. I was wondering if folks received them. Yeah, I had a little bit of difficulty figuring out everyone's email addresses, and I apologize. I didn't send them to staff, but I did send them to the general number and to all of the counselors. If most of you have received them, that would shorten my public comment.
Could we just say, like, did counselors get that? I personally didn't get it, but I saw some nodding heads. Allie, yeah, June's thumbs up. It sounds like it made it through. Yep, Kelly got it too.
Okay.
So I think Nick, they made it through.
Great. So just quickly, I offered 2 different types of suggested changes to the language. First, I don't think the language as written adequately represents the excessive greenhouse gas emissions from burning biomass. They exceed the emissions from burning any fossil fuel. So I've suggested a language change there. If you want to be specific, according to EPA's emission factors, burning wood emits 75% more carbon dioxide per unit of energy produced than burning natural gas. And that's what we should be looking for, because that's what's on our ISO New England grid. Also, I suggest that the document reflect that those additional emissions create a carbon debt relative to burning fossil fuels that takes decades to a century or more to eliminate. My second group of comments relate to the language about the plant being an affordable, reliable, baseload, round-the-clock facility that promotes reliability. This isn't the case. There were 2 months this year where the plant didn't operate at all. It operates only when the price of fuel from the grid is sufficiently high. So I've offered some suggested language there. And finally, I note that the task group also suggested that you look at the use of wood for purposes of generating heat. And I don't know why you're not doing that. Also, I suggest that you do. It has the same excessive greenhouse gas impacts. And in addition, it's just horrible from a public health standpoint. If people are interested, I'd be happy to present more information on that in writing. I see I'm out of time. Thank you. And thank you
Thank-
for considering my comments.
Thank you, Nick, and I appreciate you writing them up as well. That sounds like that was a really helpful thing to do. Okay, great. Ashley, you're up next on my list.
Hi there. I actually submitted comments in writing a short time ago this morning, and I'm wondering if folks might be able to acknowledge receipt of that. I'm sorry I wasn't able to yesterday. I see some nods. Thank you very much. I didn't prepare verbal comments. I kind of don't know where to begin because I have a real problem with the phrasing and word usage, which really results in a clear bias in support of biomass in this document. And I find that really troubling. Just as an example, in the first paragraph, there are several concerns that were raised. We don't see those concerns listed at all, but concerns with the biomass task group recommendations, which really cast doubt when you read concerns were raised, you don't see what those concerns are. It really casts doubt on the biomass task group recommendations. Benefit example one, number of issues with this that make it very biased. The reliability issue that kind of borders on fear mongering. This might lead Vermonters to believe that we will have intermittent power without McNeil and Rygate. Well, it's simply not the case. And when you asked earlier in the meeting, are there substitutes? Well, sure. We get our power from the ISO New England grid, and we can continue to do so with or without McNeil or Rygate. This is not a reliability issue. And yet that's raised as a legitimate issue that might strike fear into any Vermonter. Here in Burlington, McNeil didn't run for several months this year. And of course, our power didn't go out because we are on the ISO New England grid. So really, it kind of perpetuates that myth. The term non-fossil perpetuates the really climate denying myth that burning wood does not contribute to climate change. That's something that should not be, I think it needs to be phrased differently. The issue of affordability, I attached to my comments, and I really hope you will take a careful look at this document, Up in Smoke, the economic cost of the McNeil generating station to Burlington ratepayers, really highlights the fact that ratepayers are supporting this plant, this uneconomic plant that we have all been led to believe actually keeps our rates low. And I really encourage all of you to read this important document, and it really flies in the face of what we have been led to believe about McNeil. Affordable needs to be struck from the list of benefits in the recommendations that you've provided. And I won't go any further except to say that I've added a number of questions that really should be asked and added to the list of questions that you provide in this document. For example, is it such a priority to support the Vermont and New York forestry industry? Please remember that 60% of the wood that fuels McNeil comes from New York. So we are asking ratepayers to support
I'm
our
just going to flag,
biomass
Ashley,
plant
we're
and
getting close to
support
the end
the
here, Ashley.
and support the New York forestry industry as well. That's a heavy lift. I think that's an unequitable ask, and I'm sorry I went over. Thank you for taking my comments.
No, sorry, Ashley, to interrupt. I really apologize for that. I just want to make sure we have time for everyone. I appreciate your comments, and it sounds like your email did go into the people's inboxes. So thanks for that. Next up is Zach. Go ahead, please.
Good morning, all. Happy holidays. Good to see you. Thank you for this public comment opportunity. I want to start by just thanking the past three commenters. Richard Hopkins, Nick Persampieri, Ashley Adams, all made excellent points just now. I think Richard started us off with maybe what should be the paramount point of all, which is that if greenhouse gas emissions reduction is our primary task here, I certainly hope that will be the focus of this effort. I should back up a second and say my name is Zach Porter, and I'm the executive director of Standing Trees, a Montpelier-based organization that works to protect and restore forests on public lands and works on forest management and public policy more generally. Just a couple of other comments here. We are looking at another study. For those of us who've been watching this process, beginning with the Ag and Ecosystem Subcommittee conversations up until the present, looking at another study that I fear might kind of continue to serve as a delay to real action on biomass. And I want to ask all of you in your discussion that you're about to have, how do we make sure that this does not simply kick the can down the road further? How do we make sure that this is different from the process that the Biomass Task Group has already been up to and the Ag and Ecosystem Subcommittee before that? I am very afraid that we are spinning our wheels here when we all know that there is a clear need for action. So I hope that will be addressed in the conversation. Who will do the study? I hope that it will not be the actual Biomass Task Group itself, and in fact, something that is done by ANR, perhaps with outside expertise, but something that will result in a final tangible product that we can really hang our hat on, that will actually help to guide us, that we can hold ourselves accountable to going forward, so that it's not just more kind of discussion in the way that we have had this going on now for several years. Finally, as you've heard from other public comments over the last several years now, there's a requirement in statute right now for greenhouse gas accounting. I believe it's 10 VSA 582G that requires greenhouse gas accounting protocols to be addressed through rulemaking. And I don't believe this has ever been done. And until those rules are in place, it seems like it's just going to be that much harder for us to have a real honest conversation about what what the impacts of biomass are on our climate. So there's much more to say, but with the limited time, again, thank you for this conversation this morning. Thank you for the public comment opportunity. And please keep the focus on how we make sure that if we're going to do another study, which is obviously not my priority here, I want to put an end to the climate impacts that biomass is causing right now. But if we're going to do this, let's make sure it gets us to some place different from where we are right now. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Zach. Appreciate it. I'm doing some really quick notes as we go to, and I might share these back as we finish up. Next is Peter Duvall. Go ahead, Peter, please.
Thank you. Thank you for taking my comment. When I look at can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you're good.
When I look at the history of this issue at the Climate Council, I'm really surprised that how you're able to, the council's able to take information, testimony, process it, turn it into recommendations in a subcommittee, and then turn around and reject that and start all over again without information and testimony. It's just mind-boggling to me that with all of the information that's available, this would be the result And I just have to wonder who's on the Climate Council. If the people on the Climate Council are readers, they would read the news of the closings of all the biomass plants in the region and all of the problems with the subsidies that have gone into propping up these plants. And they would say, why aren't McNeil and Rygate closed already? If they were business people, they would be immediately asking for the cash flow histories and projections, certainly for McNeil, because it's a publicly owned plant, and it's owned by Vermont public utilities that are regulated by the Public Utility Commission. And would say, what are the sources and uses of funds that flow through these plants? And of course, they would see the reports of INRS on the economic study and see that millions and millions of dollars have gone into subsidizing McNeil for very little result and lots of emissions. If the people on the council were attorneys, they'd be reading federal legislation and looking at the Section 432 biomass rider, where Congress declares carbon neutrality, overruling physics and biology and chemistry for the last few years, and would say, wow, these biomass plants are a house of cards balanced on the tip of a pen in Congress. And if that biomass rider ever was removed from future budgets, EPA would swoop in and finish the job that it started 15 years ago, trying to get rid of these biomass plants and high emitting facilities. I see the red card. This is a terrible document. Just reject it and focus on the job that you have at hand, which is, or which you've been given, which is to focus on greenhouse gas emissions and stop messing around trying to pretend you're the Public Utility Commission or the Economic Development Corporation. You're just the Climate Council. Work on emissions. Thank you. And thanks for
Peter.
taking my comment.
Thank you, Peter. Okay. Annette, you're up.
Morning, Annette Smith, Vermonters for a Clean Environment. I'm going to follow on somewhat similar to Peter's comments. I would like to go on record objecting to the process through which this report was done. I don't know if you've looked at when the task group's report became a final document to the council, but it was more than a year ago. And when it was decided that a group of counselors who weren't part of that would rewrite the recommendations, I asked for some sort of public process around it, some meeting minutes, something that would provide the opportunity for the public to have some understanding of what went into it. And I just think this was an inappropriate process that was really very disrespectful to the people who spent all the time on the biomass task group. There are things that I would have liked to have seen done, that one of which was discussed by the biomass task group, and that is some actual on-the-ground health surveys and discussions with people who live around the plant, which I understand has a lot of diversity. So I think this is an equity issue. And statistics from the Department of Health are one thing, but actual experiences of people about what it's like living downwind of the smokestack. How is it affecting the people in the community? There were discussions about doing it. It never happened. The other thing that I think I may have asked for, and I think is important for Vermonters to understand, are the subsidies. How many what's the amount of money in subsidies? I'm aware that there have been several $1 million+ studies for capturing the waste heat. Also, what subsidies are expected going forward with this district heating system? How much has this plant required in subsidies through its history? And so there, but I agree with Peter that if your narrow focus is emissions, then the crux of the matter here is, do these emissions count? And they're being excused as biogenic, and it just doesn't make any logical sense. The emissions that are going up are equivalent to most of the cars on the road in Vermont. That's the fact. And it doesn't matter that trees will grow back in 100 years and replace those emissions. We are dealing with it right now and kicking the can down the road for another report. I join with the request to reject this report. And since you have to update your plan for 2025, do an honest process that is public and that respects the work that's done. Thank you.
Thanks, Annette. That's great. Next up, I see Cheryl Joy.
Hi again, everyone. So I just want to echo what everyone else said before, all 6 of them, I think. And I'll just address an issue that I didn't hear somebody comment on yet, which is the sustainability of the forests when they are harvested, when trees are harvested, and forest health. I'm not going to talk a lot about it. I have written about it before, and I think I've spoken about it before also. But one of the things that's in the new recommendations talks about what would happen. There's a question on what would happen if biomass electricity were phased out. How would it impact forest health in a positive or negative way to not have the harvesting? So really, the forest health from a silvicultural standpoint, from foresters and forestry, is very different from forest health from an ecological standpoint, from forest ecosystems. And it's only negative to be harvesting trees and cutting trees out and going in, and especially due to, even today, with the immense amount of rain and excessive flooding, again in Chester, which is where I live, after only a couple of months. Stopping all the forest harvesting, especially to burn the wood, would be very positive for our ecosystems. We're in the midst not just of a climate crisis, but also a biodiversity crisis. And part of that is cutting down forests. I know we need to use the wood, but we don't need to burn it, as you all know from the previous commenters. And so I just want you to realize that from a forest health and a sustainable forestry, there's not really a good forest health aspect outcome from harvesting. It's different from foresters versus ecologists. And so take that into consideration as well. Thanks for hearing me. And I echo what everybody else said also prior. Thank you.
Thanks, Cheryl Joy. Appreciate that. Anyone else? I'm just looking at the chat as well. Nick dropped a comment in the chat. Any other public comment we have right now? Okay. Just so folks know and counselors know, I've been taking some sort of quick notes as we go of this, so that if folks want to refer back to it, they're quick notes, but they're trying to capture these key points. So if folks want to circle back, I'm always happy to share that on the screen so we can have it present in our minds as we're finishing up this conversation. Okay. Great. Well, thank you for that round of comment. That's very helpful context as we switch gears now back to the council and try to decide what to do with this revised document. The way I thought might be helpful is, first, if there's any reflection around what you just heard. Second, if there are things you would like to see that really make the difference for you in feeling comfortable with this document, that you'd like to see as friendly amendments to what this document is, if that would help you feel comfortable approving it. If there's something more significant, that's good too. Now's the time to say it. So this is our chance as a council to work on this document in real time. And if there's anything that you would really want to see changed, let's do it. Let me just pause there and say, counselors, as you're thinking about the task you have and looking at this document and making a decision on it, what do you need to say right now? Any reflections? Paula, go ahead.
So before I start talking, I just want to make sure I understand. So what phase of the discussion are we in? Are we in the, here's why I have a problem with this section?
Yeah.
Thank
This
you.
is the phase where you're identifying the things that are deeply concerning. If you wanted to see
Okay.
a change, like, let's talk about that a little bit. We'll
Okay.
chew on it, and then we'll make some sort of more formal, like, I propose, therefore we change the document in this way.
Okay, great. So I don't think we need more science. The science is 100% settled on the so-called carbon neutrality of wood. We don't need to understand that any better. How we feel about it makes zero difference to the atmosphere. And when you burn biogenic carbon, you send carbon to the atmosphere. That does not mean I want to reject this recommendation, though, because as a member of the Just Transition Subcommittee, as well as the Rural Resilience and Adaptation Subcommittee, I just want to point out that emissions are not the only thing under the purview of the Climate Council. So one of the things that I appreciate and care very much about in the set of recommendations is that they suggest that we should understand the scope and depth of the potential economic impacts, as well as health impacts to people who work in forestry on the one side and people who live near the plants on the other side. When we talk about a just transition, we are not just talking about racial justice and health disparities in racial and ethnic groups compared with more privileged people in society, although obviously that is a big part of it. And, we have to think about that. That's very important and is an aspect of this conversation. But I also think that I personally, even though I want to shut down those plants, I think they're doing bad things. Okay. But I don't think we should do that without understanding the economic impact that closing them is going to have on the people who work there, the people who work in forestry. I think that's a justice issue as well. I'm not super keen on this whole idea that, life cycle assessment is going to solve everything, because, that's one of the specific problems I have with the language, but we can maybe get into that a little bit later. I can put them in the chat. But overall, I think that it's a good move to understand what the impact is going to be before we say, yeah, shut it down. That's kind of where I'm falling here.
Thanks, Paul. That's really helpful. And I do want to circle back later to some specific things. If there are specific, changes you'd like to put on the table, let's circle back to those.
Okay. Is it okay to put some stuff in the chat?
Yeah, that's a great way to do it.
Cool.
Yeah. Thankful. Joey, go ahead, please.
I appreciate all the comments and really good recommendations. And I have some thoughts too on potential, based on those comments and in general, strategic changes to the document itself. But my one question I have for you, and maybe it's a question for Jane, is I totally agree with Zach's comment. I agree with many of the comments that were made, but about just like understanding that this is frustration, that this is a process that just keeps processing, and that ultimately we want to get to an informed outcome, which is what I hope a study that would be open and, people could participate in would answer the question with a level of definitiveness that we have lacked thus far. So I'm just curious, because I understand there's dollars through the carbon pollution reduction grant to maybe do some planning and analysis. Is there money and is there plans to do that work? I'm just want to answer that question before I offer a few other thoughts, if possible.
Sounds like a Jane or a Julie question.
Go ahead, Jane.
No, I will defer to you, Secretary. So there is a finite amount of dollars available through the carbon pollution reduction. And I muted myself. To date, I don't believe that the study outlined here for biomass is one that we have prioritized for those dollars. That's still a little bit of a work in progress. We're going to hear discussion later in this meeting about other requests for study dollars. My understanding, or my recollection, is the council did not submit any recommendations either to the administration, I know, or to the legislature, the legislatively appointed members, in terms of funding recommendations this year. And so I do think we are currently in the position of not having resources available necessarily to support this work, and absent coming at the expense of something else that's also been indicated as a priority.
Thank you, Secretary Moore. That seems like a really important question to grapple with and get answered. So hurdle number one. But David, I have questions on process. I have some other thoughts, but I want others to reflect before I.
Okay. Great. Let's do a couple more reflections and then we can get to some real specific suggested edits or changes if that's where this is going. Jayla, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a process question, and basically, if we don't approve this recommendation, what happens? I'm not sure what happens if we don't vote to approve this. What's the other alternative?
I think that's a question for you as a council to come up with. Right now, there is not like a plan B pathway. So if you don't approve this, therefore we enter into plan B, you need to construct that plan B and what you want to do.
I would just imagine the process would be similar to when we had concerns about the first set of recommendations from the task group, which is we sort of collected our concerns and formed a subgroup to address those, and try to present something that addressed the concerns that were raised to see if we can get to consensus or at least a majority to move forward with.
Okay. And I don't know, I have some concerns. I feel like there's a lot lacking in this recommendation. And I don't know where I would, or how to add those considerations. Can I suggest those now, or?
Yeah, I mean, we're going to get into the phase right now of making some
Okay.
suggested edits. And I think the spirit of this is, let's focus on the edits that really get at the core pieces that are making you and someone deeply uncomfortable about it. Because this has been a long process. And so trying to do that in real time in a meeting is going to be tricky if we have large amounts of content we need to shift in real time. But absolutely, Jill, I mean, we're just sort of doing an initial round of conversation. And then I see even Paola putting in some specific suggestions in the chat. And I want to transition to that sort of specific suggestion moment and very soon.
Okay, well, I don't see enough in there about the way that forests will be impacted, especially in terms of forest soils and their ability to absorb moisture and flood resiliency. I mean, we really need to consider this in a holistic way. And I just think there's a lot more here, or there's a lot more out there that needs to be considered, and that this is a little limited.
Okay. But certainly I'm writing down, it sounds like you want to definitely put on the table, if we go forward in the study, you'd want to see in that study a look at impact of harvesting on forest soils, resiliency of soils to flooding and that kind of stuff.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Nice. That's great. Allie, a comment, and then let's think about some real specific stuff we might want to do to this document.
Thank you. Yes, just a quick question. In the past, when studies have been recommended, is there any way to estimate how long those take? And also who does it, the process for deciding who conducts that study?
Yeah, I maybe can jump in here. Generally, studies have been funded through the Agency of Natural Resources budget. Obviously, resources available for those studies are finite. Not in approximately a year ago right now, the Climate Council wrote a letter articulating some priorities that sort of were drawn from remaining gaps from the initial climate action plan that needed to be addressed. But generally, ANR has served as the administrator of those funds. In terms of the timing, it depends. We're putting out an RFP, so it ends up being part of a contract negotiation with whoever the selected consultant team is. Certainly, I think our experience has been things go slower than we would like. There's a high demand for services in these areas, and also the way we've structured them to be very to provide good opportunities for the council or subcommittees of the council to engage in the work also tends to stretch the timeline out. So it'd be really hard sitting here today to give you a clear answer about what the turnaround could be. It would be part of developing the scope and then thinking about what kind of council engagement and potentially public engagement would want to be incorporated as part of that.
Thanks, Julia. And is it fair to say that sort of the Climate Action Office is kind of the hub for dealing with that contracting piece and being the counterpart to a
It is, and I think important to keep in mind, we still have a number of planes in flight that that took off last year, including around the life cycle analysis for carbon, the measuring and assessing progress tool that's under development. And so our capacity is finite, and that's a factor in these conversations as well.
Yeah. And Allie, just, in the spirit of you joining recently, the method typically has been that the council through the subcommittees provides input, and particularly the science and data subcommittee, but others provide input on TORs, often the terms of reference for a request for proposals, and provides that sort of interaction. So that's been the past. And so it's sort of like the precedent for the future as well. Okay. Anything else from a sort of general reflection standpoint before we dive into some of the specifics? Okay. And while I appreciate folks from the public jumping in the chat, I really want to try to keep the chat with the counselors for the moment to keep us focused on the decision the counselors need to make right now. If I'll just kindly ask if folks can hold back from the chat for the moment, who aren't counselors. All right. So, Baldi, you've put a couple specific things on the table through the chat, and I'm just looking at them myself. These are so I see it's in the sort of preamble language around benefits and costs of those. So benefit number 4, you've got some suggested language there. Benefit number 5, you've got some suggested language there. I'm wondering, can you just walk us through for 1 second, like if you were to make some very specific suggestions? I'm trying to see if they're embedded in these chats as a very specific language change.
Yes, it's a little hard to read in the chat, so I can just explain. So in the first thing that I'm asking about, so under benefit number 4, yes, okay. There's this phrase with little additional pollution, but it's not clear what the biomass would be replacing. And the word pollution is just kind of ludicrously vague. So my suggestion would be to say, it would displace X And because of that, it would likely result in fewer emissions of a specific chemical compound, whatever that is.
Got it. So let's say we have a hard time doing that in real time today.
Mhm.
Can you imagine what would be language that we would be able to do in real time today that would sort of get at that core issue?
Well, I
Okay, 'cause
actually
we-
don't know the answer to the questions. I just think
Yeah.
that it's a little bit of hand waving, like, yeah, we know it's got to be good in some way. And it's not really saying like, yeah, it's not specific enough to actually count as a benefit, as far as I can tell, because there's not enough information.
Aha. Okay. And in that spirit, if we were to try to get to a version of this document today that we were able to say,
Mhm.
like, this is good
Um,
enough to go forward, can you imagine us framing that reality of where we are right now in this moment?
Yeah, so I guess, I mean, sort of what I was wondering is if somebody would know the answers to the questions who was part of the writing group
Okay.
at one point. The other possibility would just to say may potentially displace fossil fuels and just leave the pollution out. Like, we don't actually know the answer. Maybe we just take it out completely. Because if there's
Okay.
not something we
Yeah.
can point to as a benefit scientifically, like, why is it on a list?
Fair enough. Okay, great. And then the second one, and then Joey, I'll jump to you in just a sec. Or do you want to jump in on that very same point, Joey?
I had a thought on a potential
Okay.
path forward.
But on that very same point or a different point?
Just in general, the points around the pros and the cons. Maybe
Okay.
like just jettisoning them. I mean, with appreciation for all of the work that has been done, I don't want to denigrate that. And I think clearly there are pros and cons. And I guess what I wondered about is just sort of cutting the narrative a little bit to be like, we still haven't cracked this nut. We need more information. We urge the legislature to fund a full and final analysis, either through budget adjustment, or which is earlier than waiting for the whole legislative session, or, you know, in the budgeting process, but to say we need, you know, clear, you know, science-based information. We need a final answer to this question for the state of Vermont for large facilities, but also maybe saying something about considerations for how biomass applies to other things, just food. But just maybe a few sentences that in like scrapping the pros and cons, because clearly there are pros and cons. And you know, but I think we want to answer with a definitive science-based, you know, and I wonder about building out the questions a little bit. I think we had some thoughts today from public comment in general about other questions we might want answered. I just wonder if we could truncate it. And then lastly, ask that study, answer that question definitively. So that's a process question I just want to offer.
That's helpful. So let me tease apart a couple of those because I don't want to lose them, Joey. One is in the spirit of getting out of sort of having to nail the pros and cons right now really carefully, you say maybe just jettison that. Like, let's not, because that helps us not get ourselves into trouble. So that's one interesting thing. And then the other suggestion I don't want to lose, or the other two, one is about in the document being clear that there's a request to the administration and the legislature to fund this, right? So that was another thing you said. And you had some other suggestions about putting some detail into the study itself. So let's not lose those latter two and stick with that first one. Paula, you've got a couple suggestions around the pros and cons. I just want to make sure that or the benefits and costs. I want to go through those quickly and then get your opinion, Paula, as well of Joey's question or suggestion of like maybe we should just jettison those lists.
Yeah, I wonder, is it worth me going through this other one? Like, I really appreciate that comment, and I think it could solve a lot of problems. Just because, like, what we're asking is to find out what the pros and cons are, right? So why do we need to say what they are ahead of time in an unscientific way? So.
Right. Yeah. It was trying to be helpful and we may have gotten ourselves into trouble. Right. So I'm curious, other counselors. So I'm trying to take these pieces as they come up, right? So one piece is there's a bunch of stuff in the pros and cons that's causing some turbulence, right? So in the spirit of trying to address that, there's a couple pathways. One is we try to address those specific issues, like let's work on policy suggestions. Another is, you know what? We don't need this in our document. Let's just get rid of it. Some of this stuff is going to be answered by the study. Bram, you've got your hand up. I was wondering if it was about that.
Yes, it is about that. Two things. I think it's, fine to get rid of the pros and cons. I will say they were included to address concerns that we had heard in previous public comment that we were unaware of the harms. And so we did want to include those simply to make explicit the fact that we are aware of them. I will also say both the pros and the cons are pretty clearly labeled as examples of, not a definitive list of. These are just examples. And finally, to Paul's particular point about district heat, Burlington Electric does estimate that providing district heat to UVM will reduce Burlington's commercial sector use of natural gas by 16%. So there's a number we could add if we wanted to.
Okay. All right. So I'm keeping track of these. We're not going to make a decision at the exact moment, but we need to start actually not dropping this stuff. Let me take a few more hands and see what we have, and then we'll start to go through and actually do some decision making on this. Secretary Moore.
Thanks. Yeah, largely just going to amplify what Bram said is that the issues and concerns and are really an attempt to reflect back what we heard from the biomass task group originally and try to have that incorporated into this document. Obviously, there was a lot of information that they received and wanted to be both responsible to and reflective of that information that had been provided. And so that was our attempt at a summary. I think Bram pointing out that the use of the word including was not intended to be exhaustive. But if folks feel like it's sort of more harm than good or more complicated than intended, I don't personally see a reason not to remove that language.
Thanks, Secretary Moore. That's helpful. Yeah. June, go ahead, please.
Yes, good morning. I've been following the discussion here, and I have put some suggested edits in the chat because I think they taper the conversation. First, I commend the committee, the people who worked on producing this recommendation. It is clearly the product of very thorough, earnest work. What I'm struck by is that no matter which way I slice and dice this, there remain questions about what in my world are called adjudicated facts are that are going to serve as the basis for a very important policy decision, whether or not to have biomass in the state. And I am also struck by the fact that we have heard overwhelmingly today from folks who have very reasoned grounds for urging that biomass for electric generation be abandoned. I'm also mindful that I regularly inhabit an ecosphere where decision makers have licensed such facilities. As we speak here, biomass generation remains a lawful activity in the state of Vermont. And what we are asking here is, should it? And I believe that in order to foster the requisite degree of public trust, meaning that all are heard or at least have an opportunity to be heard, coupled with transparency, an open proceeding where folks know that this is their opportunity to be heard, it would serve us well to avail ourselves of the mechanism that we already have at hand to make this kind of reasoned evidentiary inquiry that is subject to the discipline of cross-examination and rules of evidence and the like, none of which has occurred to date. And then we shift the we address the concern that way that I think is foremost here for many of the folks who'd like to see biomass generation terminated, which is that we not keep chasing our tail, but rather come to a conclusion and actually act. And so for that reason, I focused on the language in recommendation 2. And I think it's fine to leave everything else that's already in here before. And I would simply say we need to be more granular about what we mean by state in recommendation 2. I would simply strike that first sentence because the state of the law right now is that it's a lawful activity. So nothing this council says today can enjoin or result in an injunction, prevent people from availing themselves of their lawful rights to petition the PUC for a CPG to build a biomass generation facility. Rather, we should recommend that the PUC reevaluate the role of biomass based on the results of the study that we frankly concede here today needs to be conducted. And then in the interim, if the PUC is reviewing possible new electric-led biomass facilities, as is their obligation under law, that they be required to review and address the issues described in this document that the committee put together today. I thank you for your consideration.
Thanks, June. So the core concern there is, and this reminds me of what TJ was saying in the last conversation in that second recommendation, is making sure we're doing something that actually plugs into the sort of actual legal system, what's in place now, in an effective way, right? And it does that in the right kind of way. And I think that's what you're trying to do there, June, right?
Yes. I don't think I'm trying. I think I actually do it, David.
Oh, even better. Thank you. Sorry. My apologies. Okay, so that's another specific recommendation that's on the table, and we can write that up and show what it looks like. Okay, let's take one more hand, and then let's see where we are in terms of actual decisions that you all can make on this right now. David, go ahead.
I believe that sometime within the next month, the life cycle study that the secretary touched on will be published, and that will provide a great deal of insight to many of the issues that we are hearing on either side of the issue. And that has sort of been underwriting my feeling that we wanted to do this right for Vermont, and we will understand much more about this once that life cycle study is published. In terms of actually doing the work imagined in what's in front of us today, as I understand it, there's $3 million new to the climate office, and maybe some of that money could be made available to, where necessary, go beyond that life cycle study. And one of the things that is inherent in the document in front of us today is that we want to not only cope or deal with biomass, but we want to be ready and adjust for impacts of decisions around biomass as it affects Vermonters. And that's, we're not ready for that. And that's part of what is built into the document that's in front of us today. So in terms of will we get to a point of a decision? Yes. Will it take a little longer than this afternoon? Yes. But we've got pieces coming together that hopefully will provide enough guidance so that this group, the council, can make a recommendation to the lawmakers to answer some of the questions that Commissioner Tierney put forward.
Great. Thanks, David. Okay, so, I see a hand. Paula, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to this also kind of what David just said goes to the final suggestion that I had, that even if we throw out the benefits and harms, which I'm kind of pulling for now, there is a sentence, the last sentence says the recommendations are consistent with the way the study is being carried out, meaning the life cycle assessment. And I just want to point out that most life cycle assessment methodology leaves out the greenhouse gas, well, not all the greenhouse gas emissions. The CO2 emissions of burning biomass are left out because of this IPCC thing that industry has claimed, even though IPCC has disavowed your ability to do that. So there's this idea out there that it's carbon neutral to burn biomass, and it is embedded in LCA tech methodology. So if that's not being addressed, in reality in the LCA, we really can't rely on that to answer these questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. I just want to do a quick double click on that last point you made, because I want to make sure there's clarity on that. And I'll ask Jane or others who can help out. One thing is the life cycle analysis and how it treats emissions. Another thing is the state's inventory and how it treats emissions. And you may have different answers to what you just said, Paula, on those two different documents. And this is above my pay grade a little bit, so I'll ask for some help. But I just want to make sure that that comment, if we need to do something to this document, because it's not doing what you hope it does in the life cycle analysis. So I wonder, Jane, or somebody who can just say, based on Paula's last comment on, is the life cycle analysis treating biomass emissions as a net zero versus what the inventory does? Was that question clear?
Are you asking me to comment on the life cycle analysis, which is not done yet?
No, I'm asking you to say, addressing Paula's concern, like how does life cycle analysis, how are greenhouse gas emissions looking, or how is biomass emissions looked at in that life cycle analysis?
Well, just to be clear, the life cycle analysis is not in the greenhouse gas inventory. So this is where I think it gets a little confusing. Yeah, so there's a greenhouse gas inventory for the state of Vermont, which is what our emissions are calculated on as per the Global Warming Solutions Act, and is what we're required to cut per the emissions reductions requirement. And the life cycle analysis is a supplemental document to the greenhouse gas inventory that will calculate the emissions of things like wood biomass on a life cycle analysis for information policy decision making. But it will not change the way we account for biogenic emissions in the greenhouse gas inventory. So I think this is where it gets a little confusing at times. So, and that will be done early in the first quarter of 2024.
Thanks, Jane.
Yeah, and my comments went specifically to assurances that we received that it would in fact deal with all carbon discharges in Vermont. Not how some organization outside the state dealt with it, but how it's dealt with here in Vermont. And I believe we count discharges from biomass as carbon discharges.
Jane, if you were trying to say something, you were on mute, just so you know.
I was not. I wasn't sure if there was a question in David's comment. I just heard a comment, but
Okay.
thanks. I was looking at Colin to make sure what I said was correct.
All right. So again, I'm trying to look at things that are going to require us to make a change in this document. That's what so Paula, just back to you, like eventually, it's like, think about, is there something that needs to be changed in this document based on what you understand that you would want to suggest to the rest of the council?
Yeah, so basically, I mean, I understand what a greenhouse gas inventory does. Basically, when you do that, when Vermont does that, if there are trees cut down in Vermont, they report that as emissions. And so they do not report the burning as emissions because they already counted the trees. That's where this whole carbon neutrality thing comes from. It's in an inventory for a large jurisdiction. You're saying I cut down the trees. It's assumed basically that that carbon went away immediately, even though over time it goes away. So in a greenhouse gas inventory, you report biomass not as burning, but as having cut down the trees. In a life cycle assessment, and I don't actually even know the scope, like what are the boundaries of the life cycle assessment, but in a life cycle assessment of a product or of a utility, it would look different because the utility didn't cut down the trees. The utility is burning the trees. So in terms of that boundary of the utility, they didn't count that yet. They didn't count the trees being cut down. It's for them to talk about their emissions. So if we're looking at McNeil, since they didn't already take responsibility for cutting the trees down, they have to take responsibility for emitting the carbon dioxide. So I just want to make sure, like in the LCA, whatever, I don't even know what the scope is, what it's of. Is it of the grid? I'm not sure, but I want to understand, is that typical LCA methodology using carbon neutrality part of the methodology of the LCA that we have commissioned?
Thanks, Paula. Jane says she'll put the RP in the chat, and I know I can say the genesis of the way that sentence reads right now was checking against what the work with the biomass task group had asked for against the RFP and the terms of reference, and it checked when that happened. So
okay,
I guess checking it again might be helpful if you want to do
right.
that in the background kind of thing.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Joey, and then I'm going to show a little list of things that I think we need to make some quick decisions on.
Thank you. I was going to raise the last sentence or the couple of sentences in general. I mean, in general, I think this question is really fundamental. I mean, I think as Richard Hopkins had said, like our North Star should be like greenhouse gas emissions reduced. And that requires the leaning into the inventory that we have, which falls short, as Paula just articulated, overlaying that with a life cycle greenhouse gas emissions assessment so that we know to the degree we can, apples to apples, what is reducing greenhouse gas emissions over what time frame so that we can make very informed decisions. So I think greenhouse gas inventory, Paula, to what you had noted earlier, is not the panacea, but it is very important. So I think I would like some clarification around what that last sentence says, but I think what we really do need is a full view of the greenhouse gas emissions picture, apples to apples, so that we can understand that. And so I think that last sentence, I don't really understand how it's written, but I think what I would like to see is that that is a core component of the analysis baked into it.
Okay. All right. Bram, did you want to jump on something?
Yeah, just very quickly want to have us all keep in mind that the Global Warming Solutions Act does set specific emissions reductions targets and require them to be proportionate to sector. And although there aren't sort of equally quantifiable or timelined goals, the law does also require us to give equal standing to ensuring a just transition and to paying attention to co-benefits. And I think those, as I said earlier in my comments, those all play in here. And we'd be slightly remiss in our duties if we ignored everything except emissions.
Thanks, Bram. Okay. All right, so I've been making a list, as you all have been talking, about what I think are the actual decision points, and some of them need a little more fleshing out, but I just want to test with you if these are the things. Hang on a second. Let me just share my screen with you. Give me 1 second. Sorry, this is a little bit small. Let's make it bigger. Okay, what I'm hearing in this conversation would be these kinds of things you'd want to test in terms of potential changes to this document before you make a a more definitive yes or no on the document. One is the possibility of eliminating that section about, hey, here's some potential benefits and some potential costs, right? Just get rid of that because it creates turbulence rather than clarity that the group was seeking. If you don't get rid of it, there's some specific recommendations to change items of the benefits and cost section. Paula put those in the chat. All right. But that sort of is moot, if not relevant, if you get rid of them altogether. A third thing is what June put out there for a specific change to recommendation number 2, right? So there's a very specific suggestion there to get that aligned with what Public Service Department sees as appropriate sort of advice and recommendation from the council right now. Fourth, I heard from at least one of you that perhaps in this document, there should be a specific ask of the administration and the legislature to fund this study, make sure that there's funds and a pathway for this study. Fourth, I heard from Joey, but I didn't hear the details yet of specific additional details for the study. From Jael, there was a specific request around as part of that, looking at soil impacts on harvest, from harvest on soil and resilience from flooding. And there, maybe Joey has some additional things as well, others of you. And finally, what we've just been wrestling with is how we're mentioning the life cycle analysis and what that should be doing. Again, this is a study that's like ongoing and about to finish in a few months. So we need to be careful what we're actually doing here because the thing's sort of cooking along. But there's an interest in making sure that that's expressed correctly. All right, so those are the sort of 6 things that I heard that you might want to do some rapid fire yays or nays on. And our procedure would be, and Michelle, I'll go to you in 1 second. It would be to work our way through these. And if there's a majority of folks here that say yay to them, then that becomes a new version of it. And then when we get to the end, we'll say, well, with all these changes, whatever changes make it in, are we okay with the document as our expression? So that's our process right now. Michelle?
Thank you, David. This is perhaps a clarifying question related to number 3, June's suggestion for recommendation number 2. My question is, if would the PUC process address all of the elements that are included in recommendation number 1, so that therefore maybe recommendation number 1 could be eliminated if we went with June's suggestion for recommendation number 2? And I just don't know the answer to that.
Wait, hang on a second, Michelle. So you're saying if the PUC, if somebody happens to come to the PUC and suggest they want to do some more biomass, electricity generation, like if they cover all these things, then we don't need to be doing a study? Is that what you're saying?
I guess what I'm trying to say is maybe the recommendation. So is the recommendation to suggest to the legislature, or to make a recommendation to the legislature, that they direct the PUC to examine the policy of utilization of biomass for electricity generation within the state of Vermont, and that the PUC's process would have to answer sort of all of those questions relative to whether this is an appropriate policy for the state. So kind of combines June's recommendation of taking recommendation number 2 and putting it to the PUC. But I guess my question is, could we put the whole thing as a recommendation to the legislature to ask the PUC to examine this broader policy question? Because I don't believe that, personally, I don't believe that we are the correct body to be making recommendations on state energy policy writ large when there is a body that has the responsibility for that in conjunction with the legislature.
Okay. All right. Do folks, that seems like we need a quick comment on that. June, did you want to jump in on that?
Yes, I think Michelle very articulately captured something that I was holding in reserve, Michelle. I'm trying to move at the speed of trust here and did not want to come out and say, let's jettison the study because the council and the committee, let me rephrase that. The committee and the stakeholders and folks who participated in it clearly feel a need for a study. And therefore my thinking was, okay, let's do a study and let's put that in front of the PUC and have the PUC weigh that. But in my personal opinion, I agree with everything you just said. And that would be my preference, is to simply say, PUC, take all the questions that are under item 1 here and study them. And it would have the added benefit that we wouldn't have to beg for funding for a study. And we wouldn't have to continue to argue about whether we see the study as fair or not, comprehensive or not, et cetera, et cetera. That's why I like to bring the discipline of evidentiary rules and process, particularly cross-examination to establish bias to the process. So I would adopt what Michelle said.
Okay. And let me just make sure I hear the recommendation is, do you say PSD, like for public service
I said
department?
PUC. No, certainly not.
Yeah.
No. PUC.
You said PUC, right?
PUC at all times, PUC. PUC is the decision maker, the trier of fact, folks who establish what adjudicated facts are, and they have all the world of competency for that, and the Public Service Department is one voice. And a PUC process allows anybody here, anybody who's commented from the public, to make their views known.
Got it. Okay. David, Bram, David first.
I'm gonna question that last statement because I've been in front of the PUC and I know that civilians do not testify before the Public Utilities Commission.
Well, then you need to go again. You can ask to intervene and you can be a witness.
Yeah, and I, as a layperson, am gonna be really prepared to deal with a room full of attorneys, so.
That's my point. It's not supposed to be that way. It's supposed to be open to folks, including you, Bram, and I'm sure they are. That's my experience with them.
That's David talking, but yeah.
Well, and just so you understand, bottom line, I do not think that is an appropriate idea.
Fair enough. And David, I apologize. I was mistaking you for Bram Klempner, and Bram, maybe I should be apologizing to you. I apologize to both of you.
Apologize to him.
Okay, fair enough.
All right. All right. So there's some different views. Bram, on this topic as well?
Yes. Although I will just say I do not find it insulting at all to be mistaken for David Dean.
That's a great comeback.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, so, I think we may be losing sight a little bit of what we're trying to accomplish here. This study is in the service of the Climate Council's carrying out its obligation to put together a plan to reduce emissions. And I don't see that having the PUC take over reviewing biomass against these criteria allows the Climate Council to make the recommendation it needs to.
Right. So if you feel like, Bram, there's a different purpose involved here, and it's a purpose that does sit with the Climate Council's mandate to come up with a climate action plan and climate action planning. Is that what you're saying, Bram? Okay. Do others have comments on this? So I just want to make sure I'm tracking, Michelle, what you put on the table and then how June added to it. So Michelle, you're putting on the table, perhaps we don't need recommendation number 1. What we need is revised 2, and we signal the things we'd like to see the PUC address, but we sort of push it all that direction. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, essentially, although I think June sort of captured it better in terms of the fact that all of the questions within recommendation number 1 need to be a part of the package in terms of, it's one, I think the rub in terms of what I'm having trouble with is
if the Climate Council recommends that the use of biomass for electricity generation is not in the best interest of the state's climate, this issue is still going to have to come before the PUC in terms of them as the regulators of authorized utility production for electricity. And so I guess I'm wondering if there is a more sort of direct way to get to this in terms of queuing this up for the PUC more expeditiously so that all of the information that we are seeking as a climate council can be revealed, because we apparently don't have any other resources that are apparent to us other than what the legislature may provide in a future budget recommendation to undertake answering the questions that are included in recommendation 1. So I don't know if that clarifies it, David, at all or not, but
Yeah,
that's
okay, but yeah, so you still want to see that content, you're just pushing it towards the PUC and having them address that content. Okay. Rich, Joey, and then we're going to need to either take a quick break or come back and make some quick decisions, because we're sort of going to run out of our, we've been doing this for about 2 hours now, and I want to make sure we have some freshness. Rich, go ahead.
Thanks. A number of really good comments have been made today by counselors and by representatives from the public. Focusing just on the matter that we're discussing right at the minute, my judgment, we need recommendation 1. The study is important. It will guide the council. It will guide the legislature, and it can be introduced as evidence, as June points out, in any proceedings before the PUC. So the idea to do away with recommendation 1 and just go to number 2 and say, well, the PUC will hear it, to my mind, it's too narrow. I think we should recommend the study. And I think I'll stop there. I agree, by the way, with Peter Duvall and also with June Tierney that we, the council, are not the adjudicator. We're not the PUC. We're not a permit granting authority. And we just need to remember, what our role is to encourage those decision makers to have the best available complete assessment of this issue when making decisions. And that's a proper role for the council. I don't think we're going to use the study and then we're going to decide.
Right. Thanks, Rich. Joey?
I mean, my input really tracks a lot of what Rich just said, appreciating sort of the goal you're putting forward, Michelle and Commissioner Tierney. Because we have limited dollars, but we also need, we need really good science-based, fact-based information to make an informed decision. And I think to the degree, finding creative ways to use limited dollars is really important. I do think an independent analysis that would inform the PUC process and that would be more, I still think that that's warranted. We're having this conversation before, we're having a conversation about the $3 million in funding. And I know, as you said, Secretary Moore, it is limited. So the sky isn't the limit, but I'm sort of grappling with, this seems really important, and an independent analysis that would be led by an entity, probably a consultant, that would be very helpful. So I'm sort of struggling with the cart before the horse, but I do think that the Climate Council's role as an advisory entity to inform the PUC process will be very important to help the state of Vermont think about how to grapple with this. So good luck, David.
Great. Yeah, no, that's helpful. And Secretary Moore, and then there's one more thing we got to clear up before we do a little quick round of sort of voting or making decisions on these potential edits. Secretary Moore?
Yeah, I just want to be clear that we received a $3 million pollution grant. Only $1 million of that is available for studies, and there are proposals to utilize that this would come at the expense of. And so just to be clear, like there are more demands for those dollars than dollars exist. The agency is working through the process we committed to with EPA that involves stakeholder input around how we set those priorities. But I think that we need to be very eyes wide open that this will come at the expense of something else that's likely been articulated as a priority. And the Climate Council is a very important voice, but one voice that we'll need to consider as we're trying to figure out how to best utilize those dollars.
Thanks. Okay. So what I'm trying to do right now is to get us into a more decision-making mode. And I showed this list before. I just updated it. I think we need to do a quick decision point on whether to scrap that whole benefits and cost section. And then if we don't do that, let's talk about some quick hits on changes to specific items in it. Then we need to look at June's suggested edit to recommendation 2 and make a decision on that. And then I've added this as a fourth point, what we were just talking about of, do we really need the study, or do we need to put the contents of that underneath an instruction that we ask the legislator to ask the PUC to do this? So that last point of what Shell and June were kind of putting on the table, and others had different views on that. Then, depending on the outcomes of that, we need to do a quick decision point. Do we put in this document a specific request to the administration and the legislature to, come up with the funds to do this work? Then there's been some specific things put on the table in terms of details of the study. The only one I have written down right now is we should add a note in this about looking at the impact on soil erosion and resilience to flooding. And there may be something else. I do want to put a quick caveat to say the practice has been looking at terms of reference with the council, right? So there will be chances to do the sort of finer look at what the consultant is actually asked to do. So I would put a pretty high bar on what you want to say there. And then the final piece is if there's some other specific proposal about what to put in that last sentence about the life cycle analysis, if someone wants to come up with a specific proposal, there was a request to do that. So these are 7 things that I heard you say that we need to do some quick touch points on. And we've had some discussions about each of them. Before we go down this road, I just want to check on number 6. Is there something else specific you want to put on the table that needs to get in the wording of this document that's not there, that can't wait till the next bite of this apple, which would be terms of reference for a consultant? Anything else people absolutely need to put in here? When I'm sharing my screen like this, I'm having a harder time with the chat, so people can have to help me out with that. Allie?
I just put this in the chat, sorry, and I'm not sure, but I think it's a question for the group. Could we also ask the PUC consider those suggested questions and perhaps even identify other ones that might be important in their decision-making process while that study is being conducted?
Right. I think that's what we're trying to do in that final sentence, isn't that? In that recommendation number 2, right?
Probably. I just wasn't sure how specific or we have to make that request that the PUC be doing that on a regular basis if there's.
Could someone do me a big favor and take June's recommended language and actually make those changes and drop a new version of recommendation 2 in the chat? So I can't quite do that in real time and also manage the conversation. So June or somebody else, if you could just do what you're saying and make a new version of it so we can see it.
I'm very sorry. You do not want me doing that, David.
Okay, so not you. Maybe
Not
Jane or
me.
somebody, anybody wants to take a stab. Literally take the exact edits that June said and put it in the chat. Okay. Anything else? Yeah.
David, if I may, I can't find the raise hand
Sorry,
button,
Leslie Ann.
so-
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
So I just wanted to broaden the soil and erosion piece and all of the flooding pieces to maybe make it ecosystem services. So it encompasses maybe some of the things that we're not thinking about right now here in the moment, but would be critically important from an entire ecosystem perspective. Taking the vegetation itself, the soils, the water, all of the various components as to the standing landscape that we can probably expand upon when we're looking at that.
Okay, great. That's helpful. Nice. nice typing here. Sorry about that. All right. Anything else in terms of on number 6? I also, if we're going to vote on something on number 7, we need to, or make a decision on it. We need to know what the alternative sentence is that's not there right now. So if somebody wants to put that forward, then we'll have something to do here for number 7. If we can't find an actual alternative, then we'll just leave it as is. So I'll ask folks to do that as well.
I'll take a stab at it, but give me a minute.
Okay, super. Great. All right, so why don't we start down this path right now, and then we're going to take a break and come back and look at the whole thing together. But I want to do some specific decision points right now. And I'm going to go, I just stopped the sharing so I can see you all a little bit better. But I have my list of 7 things here, and I'll pop it up whenever we need to look at specifically what we're talking about. So the first thing I want to take people's temperature on more formally is to get rid of the proposal to get rid of that list of benefits and costs at the top, not because we think like the intent was to be clearer. It seems like we're creating some turbulence as opposed to being clearer, maybe getting the cart before the horse a little bit, who knows? So I want to just if I ask the question, to the proposal to remove that text from this document and sort of cut quicker to the chase of this is what our recommendations are, or these are what our recommendations are. I want to do a quick piece in the chat. If counselors can just do a quick in the chat. Yes, I'd say yes to that proposal of just cutting at that language and going straight to the recommendations. Or I'd say no to that proposal. Let's keep that language in there and fix the pieces that folks don't like. So just quickly in the chat, could I ask all counselors to say, yes, let's remove that language, or say, no, let's keep it in and fix the problems in it. So okay. Great. Counselors, yeah, just keep rolling. Right. So if you're of keep it and fix it, that's a no, right? So it's helpful to start your sentence with no, keep it, fix it. Yes, remove, no, keep, fix.
David, I'm very sorry. May I interject something while the vote's going on? I just wanted anybody on the call who's in Montpelier, to be aware that there's a flood warning that's just been issued in Montpelier, particularly with regard to parking at 60 State Street. So if you have a vehicle there, please be aware that that www.vermontalert.gov has issued that warning.
Thanks, Jim. Okay, so I'm not sure all counselors have done this, but I just want to make sure if you haven't put in the chat of yes, remove, or no, keep it, that's what I need to do. And I just want to make sure, Michelle, yours is a no, keep it. All right. Just checking that, right?
It's a keep it and fix it.
Yep.
Thank you.
I'll ask Cam and Jane to help me out here, particularly when we're real tight. I feel like we're very close to equal, so I'm just doing some quick math. Maybe you all can do it with me in the chat of the yes, remove versus the keep and fix. I'm just counting.
Seems like keeping fixed by a nose.
I count, yeah. If someone could help me with my math, I don't want to get this wrong, but I'm counting it's by a nose, sort of 8 to 9 to 8. Folks want to keep and fix. So if that's the case, let's rapidly go into the fixing mode. I was sort of looking for an overwhelming interest, or at least a majority interest in removing. So I'm not seeing that majority interest right now in the votes that I'm seeing. And in that spirit, let's quickly then switch into those changes. Paula, you had put a few in the chat. Let's be super specific what they would be. And that way we can actually make very specific changes, and I can make a quick document here. And I have the document open as a Word document, so I can actually change it in real time so people can see what it would look like. Paula, I'm going to turn it back over to you. You had made some specific changes. Let's get those as things that people can make some decisions on right now.
Great. Do you want me to start going?
Yeah, I would
Okay.
say, remind me of, you had one on.
Yes, so the first one was under number 4, benefit.
Yep.
And so I guess since Bram mentioned the thing about natural gas, we could say something like could replace natural gas used in district by being used in district heating or other heat recovery applications, potentially reducing, I don't know, sulfur compounds. I'm not sure. Emissions of X. I would need help knowing what the actual emission reduction would be.
Right. The thing is to simply just take it away, right?
The district heat notion is to reduce CO2 emissions, at least the UVM project, and that's just one project with one facility. But the notion is there's heat that's simply being vented into the atmosphere.
The waste heat is okay. So you're sort of like replacing natural gas being used for heat with waste heat based on so this is just heat recovery. Okay. So you are displacing natural gas emissions, but so you're not adding extra because you're not burning more pellets or chips or whatever. That makes sense. Okay. So could replace natural gas heating in district heating. Anybody want to have a gander at that one? Why don't we just say could reduce carbon emissions through waste heat recovery functionality or something.
Yeah,
right.
That's great.
Okay, can you say that one more time? Because I was writing something else while you said that. So
yes.
help me out.
May potentially reduce carbon emissions by being used for district heating through waste heat recovery.
Oh my God.
So again, this is about, right. And this is where it gets so scary, because we have a study point to look at exactly what that does. If it does reduce emissions, it doesn't reduce emissions, like if there's other pathways that would reduce emissions more, right? So that's a study point down below. So I think part of it is just saying there's opportunities for district heat, right? To use current wasted heat to do district heating, right?
Yeah, so why don't we just say through waste heat recovery, just right after emissions. So I think what we want to say is may potentially reduce carbon emissions through waste heat recovery applications. Didn't you say 16% or something, Bram? I don't think we have to have.
Well, again, that was
60% in
just
there, but
natural
yeah.
gas reduction use. So it's like,
So
it's so scary to
it's
put
less
that
natural
stuff in.
gas, or it's lower
Yeah,
emissions
I
from the
think,
gas.
I think what
60%.
you said, Paul, is great. May reduce emissions through the capture of waste heat.
Yeah. Yeah, keep it simple. Simple but factual.
Good.
Okay, so that's one piece, and we can do a quick check on that. But while we're doing this editing, we'll go these one by one. But what's the second one?
The second one is that so having the fact that it has to follow responsible forest standards is not an advantage. It's not a benefit. It's a backstop against biomass being harmful in a particular way. So the fact that it has to meet a forestry standard is not a benefit of using pellets, if you see what I mean. So if we're going to keep it, it should be in the body of the letter, not in the list. And
Can I weigh in there a little bit, Paula? I think there are other forest-based activities where that's not the case. And so, I mean, I understand what you're saying. Your assumption is that it's either we're going to harvest trees for biomass or not harvest them. I don't think that that's necessarily an accurate assumption. And so that we talked at some length about kind of the biomass harvesting is held to a higher standard. And I think it's important to not lose sight of that in this discussion here.
Right. So, but part of it is like it links to a footnote, and we talked about this before. I couldn't find those standards online. So this now links to a footnote that lists standards that basically say, oh, it has to be legal. Oh, and also it can't be the product of deforestation. So like, that's not a massively higher standard to say it has to be legal and you can't change the land use. And also just the idea. So like, I'm not sure, like the way this is worded, it's not talking about like what goes on in New York or Quebec or whatever, wherever else we might get biomass from. So basically, should it be the reverse? Are we saying by sourcing pellets from Vermont, we are more sure of the forestry standards? Because just the fact that you okay, so yeah.
Paula, can I, in the interest of time, suggest something that you're putting on the table, maybe just taking that one off as a benefit? That's essentially what you're saying, right? So
yes,
one
I don't
option
think
was
it's
just
a
like,
net
let's just
benefit
take
to
that out.
anything that you have to, not deforest.
Right.
I don't know.
So one option would be just to say no thanks to this one as a as a benefit, right? Okay. And Kelly, if you want to say a word about that, let's just get a pulse check on 1 second about that. But yeah.
I wanted to clarify. So part of the reason I think that's important to leave in here, but I do agree with Paula's suggestion earlier of taking it out of the benefits and moving it into the body of the document. Because I don't know that that's a benefit of using biomass, but it is a thing about the biomass plants that a lot of people misunderstand. They think that people are able to like clear cut for a new development and then sell that to the plants. And that's not what's happening. So the fact is that I think it's important to be in there, and maybe with the stuff that's in the footnote spelled out, you're not clear cutting to build new houses and then using that for these biomass plants. They're not allowed to use that. So I didn't know that initially, and so I learned that through this process. And I think that it's helpful for folks who aren't really deep in this knowledge about how this all works to have that context. So I think that's important to leave in there, but I would definitely say that moving it out of the benefits section would make a lot of sense. And apologies for keeping the camera off and mostly using the chat. I'm dealing with 2 sick family members right now. So trying to do my best to stay and do all this at the same time.
Okay. So the specific, and we'll make a decision on this right in just a second, but Paul, the specific suggestion is essentially take this out of benefits, drop it somewhere else in the text, and more in sort of backgroundy information of part of the story.
Yeah, and also like just hearing a couple times now, people saying, well, this is there because some people aren't familiar. Like, it's just making me wonder, like, who's the audience of this? Like, I thought they were people who should know these details, but you know, who's that? Yeah, who are we going to send this to? The legislature?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe they don't know. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I want to do some quick decision making on these two things. These are two suggestions. And again, this is about a sort of a yes or no to whether to move forward in this way. So I want to start with this number 4 one. And again, we can use the chat, although Cam, I'm going to ask you if you're able to do this to set up some quick, actually, no, never mind. I take that back. Never mind. We'll keep using the chat. In the chat, let's take this first one. The specific written recommendation is to change number 4 to what's on the screen from where it was right now. And so what you would do in the chat is to say, yes, meaning I like this version better, or no, keep it the way it was. Okay. So I'm going to ask all the counselors in the chat real quick. Yes, I like this version better, or no, I'm talking just about this number 4 right here. Or no, keep it the way it was. Right? Yes, I like it better. Thanks, Paula. Or no, keep it the way it was. Just quick in the chat, all counselors, please. Yes, I like it better. Yes, I like it better. No, keep it the way it was. Yes, I like it better. And no means keep it the way it was. Anybody else need to weigh in who hasn't weighed in yet? Okay. Great. Thanks, everyone. I think we're over the threshold on that. All right, so we'll keep that change. The second thing I want to weigh in on is taking this sentence out of the benefits section and putting it somewhere else. For instance, it could be up in this paragraph where you could say the biomass task group also heard that wood energy biomass harvest in Vermont must meet responsible forest use standards. So it's taking it from here, eliminating it from the examples of benefits, and putting it up here more in the descriptors of some of the conditions. All right. So what I'm looking for in the chat is yes, take it out of here and put it somewhere else. Right. So that's your yes in the chat is yes, please remove this from the benefits and put it somewhere on the document, or no, leave it the way it is, or where it is in the way it is. Right. So I'm asking you for this number 5. Yes, let's take it out of here and put it somewhere else in the document, for instance, up in this paragraph up at the top, or no, leave it where it is. And I'm going to circle back on the clarifying point in the missions of the previous thing in a second. But number 5, we're dealing with right now, which is, yes, please remove it from where it is and put it elsewhere in the document, or no, leave it where it is. Okay. And this is starting with the first one out of the gate on this was Allie. Or David, help me out here, folks. Oh, wait, here we go. Paola was the first. Okay, great. Okay. I'm seeing a majority of counselors present saying move it. Yes, please move it. So we will move this number 5 up into another part of the document. I'm not going to do it right now in real time. I'm just noting it. Okay. Great. Great. Thanks, everyone. So while we were doing this, I noticed in the chat, Leslie Ann, you said, hey, it's not clear what emissions you're talking about, right? What I heard I want to make sure everybody heard the same thing. We were talking about greenhouse gas emissions. If we were going to talk about some other kind of emissions, we would have mentioned it, but that's what I understand. So I'm happy to add in that clarifying sentence, that clarifying word of greenhouse gas emissions. So I'll just correct me, anybody, counselors, if you heard differently, but I heard greenhouse gas emissions as the qualifier on that. And there's other questions about particulate matter and things like that, but we're talking about greenhouse gas emissions.
That would be helpful because I think to the extent that we remove any ambiguity in any part of this, whoever was picking it up to read it gets it crystal clear from the get-go. I think that's what we're trying to go for here.
Super. Thank you. Okay, great. So we made decisions on those two. Let me just show you the where we're going to now. And then we're going to take a break because we've been doing this for way too long. So we got through the top of this. Now we need to get to number 3, right? Jane, you had put in the chat a specific update to the language based on June's thing. Let me just go to there. Maybe Jane reposted.
So I think I was texting you that you only sent me a PDF document, so I was having a hard time editing.
Yeah. Oh,
So-
shoot. Okay.
Because I don't have a Word document.
Ah, rats. Okay. But here we go. Bram did it.
Even better. Thank you, Bram. That's awesome.
Right. So I'm a little nervous about the word will, because who is the council to give orders, right? You give recommendations. So maybe there needs to be some slightly different, right? The council recommends the PUC be directed to something like that.
I'm not
Did
seeing
that,
the
did those
language.
go to just to you, David? I'm just wondering because I
know.
don't see them in the chat.
Yeah.
Hang on one second. I'll share. I'll put what Bram put in the chat. Just give me one sec. This is very challenging to do in real time. So thanks for everyone's patience to do this as we do this in real time. Okay, so what I just pasted in is what would be one way of taking June's suggested comments and turning it into a new recommendation. And June, I'm not sure you were intending to say the Public Utilities Commission will, right? It should be should or something like that, right? Because
So
we
I
don't
have to I have to own my bads with my goods, David. I cuffed you earlier for saying tried when I meant did. So now I get to tell you that you're in fact right, that we ought to be couching this consistent with our authority. So I think because these are recommendations that go to the legislature, it should be phrased as, we recommend that the Public Utility Commission be directed to.
Thank you.
I just hope David Dean does not put me on his naughty list and is going to put me back on his nice list.
You're doing fine, Commissioner.
Thank you, Representative.
Any in June in particular, because this is really something that you wanted to put on the table. But
David.
yeah, Michelle, sorry.
Sorry, I'm just wondering if the second sentence in number 3 says the same thing as number 2 does in the second sentence or the sentence you added, or the whole thing, I guess.
Oh, this is
Yeah,
interesting.
but this goes away. Sorry, this would go
Okay,
in this
thank you.
case,
Yeah.
Thank you.
This is a complete, sorry, I'm just showing both. This is like option 1, option 2 kind of situation. Option A, option B.
I think,
Is that
David,
clear?
in option B, we may want to say in that first sentence, the role of biomass based on the study described above. Otherwise, it's just.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Okay, super. All right, so we've got an option A, which is what was in the document that we reviewed earlier. We've got an option B, which is sort of what June's language is transformed into actual text, right? And let's just look at it for one more second. Option B is the council recommends that the Public Utility Commission be directed to evaluate the role of biomass based on the study described above. If the
Do we
PUC is
want to say
reviewing
the results of the study described above? I mean, or are we, I guess that's maybe the piece I'm struggling with.
Well, the results would certainly clarify the time frame, Julie. It would,
Yeah.
right, it would mean that they're doing it after the study's been completed. I think it's implied, but I take your point. It could be more clearly buffed out.
Right. And it still has this part, which is like, while the study's happening, these are the things that the council is worried about.
And, you know, David, I typed that, and where I typed electric lead in what you have highlighted, electro lead biomass facilities should be plural, sorry.
Right. Which is,
yeah.
Yeah. The same as up above. Okay. So here we go, folks. We're going to do an option A, option B kind of thing in the chat right now. Again, to take on this change. So, Allie, do you want to make a comment before we do that?
Yeah, quick question. Is it important that the word new electric led biomass facilities be in there? Does it specifically have to be new, or could it also be existing?
Oh, like expanding. Yeah.
Can we just leave it? Can we delete the word new?
Right. So if something comes before the PUC that involves biomass, this is the kind of stuff we want them to be looking at. Okay. Great. David?
In option A, who is the state?
I think that was one of the reasons why option 2 got suggested.
Okay, I'm just reiterating for purposes of the vote coming up.
Yeah, it's ambiguous, right? Right.
Yes.
Okay. JL, quick comment, and then let's go ahead and just take a temperature check on this.
I'm just a little confused about like keeping the statement about not supporting or should not support new electric lead generation while this study is going forward. If we vote on B, will that still stand?
No, it wouldn't. So I think that's one of the key points to lift up, to say in that version 2, the option B, that sentence goes away.
Although I would point out that while it isn't a blanket, don't do any more new biomass, the second sentence of option B does ask that the Public Utilities Commission take into consideration all the points above in the study, and presumably that may lead them to choose not to support a new biomass facility, depending on the answers to all those questions.
Okay, so, but how long is this study going to take? And is it possible that while this is all happening, that someone will request a permit?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
That is what the law provides.
Right. Whether it's option A or option B, someone could request a permit, right? Because council doesn't make law. The question is whether, JL, I think you're pointing out a really important point, which is in option B, the council is not making a clear pronouncement to say, state of Vermont, whoever you are, state of Vermont, don't support new stuff while this study's happening. That's what option A does.
Thank you.
And option B, as Bram said, does that a little more indirectly. Please correct me if I'm mischaracterizing this, everyone else. Okay.
No, I think option B recognizes the state of the law, which is that the PUC has certain powers and the regulatory framework around biomass generation is what it is. And the best thing this council can do is recommend what should inform the PUC's discretion. But this council does not have the power to enjoin the PUC. That's all.
Yeah. Thanks, June. Yeah, that's helpful. Let's go ahead and do this in the chat, folks. Again, this one's easier because it's an option A, option B. Let's do a quick temperature check. Counselors, drop in the chat option A, option B. What feels best? Thanks, folks, for doing this. June, you just said in a direct message to me your piece.
Yes, I'm having some difficulties
It's
here
fine, but I
seeing.
think folks can recognize that you'll probably go for option B.
Yeah, but let's have the record be clear. I just don't want to lean in with my ugly, hairy eyeball because I can't see this stuff. So keep toggling on my video and my mic.
Yeah, I know the pain. Okay, the Bs definitely take it. Thanks everyone for doing that. Here's what I say. It's the top of the hour. I really think we need a break. We've shown that we can make some quick adjustments, or quick is the wrong word. We can make some adjustments to the document as we go here. We have a few more to do, and then we need to look at the document itself. Let's take a 10-minute bio break, grab something to drink, whatever you need to do to freshen the mind. Let's come back at 10 past the hour, and we'll keep going on this. We'll finish the adjustments we need to make in real time, and then we'll make a decision on the overall thing with all these adjustments now made. Okay, so let's take a 10-minute break, turn your camera off, turn your microphone off, and we'll be back 10 minutes past the hour. Thanks, everybody. All right, folks. Welcome back. That was extremely short. I apologize. As your colleagues have done, if you want to put your camera on or give other signs of life that you're back, that would be helpful. Just a note in the chat or cameras, that'd be great. Okay, great. Thanks, Kelly. All right, and thanks everyone. All right, so we're back. I just want to take stock of the time. We're going to end at 2, and we really want to leave a little bit of time for the transportation folks at a bare minimum to be able to say what they want to say on that. So let's see what we can do here in ticking off the last pieces of this, of these adjustments, and then making a decision on the overall document as amended. Okay, so here we go. Getting back into it, let me put my screen back up here of what we're doing. Okay, these are the specific suggested changes, right? One was about just eliminating the cost benefit section. We said no, keep and fix. If not eliminated, specific recommendations, we changed number 4 to new language, and we removed benefits number 5 and putting that as a sentence in the context section. Then we just agreed to go with option 2 on recommendation 2, and there's the text of it as it ended up. Okay, so we made our way through. We got some others to go here, folks. So let's see if we can go through these in an expeditious way. This one, we've had some discussion about. I just want to go straight into having a Zoom, a chat, yes or no on this. And again, just as a reminder, what this was essentially saying, we don't need to be recommending our own study as the council. Let's shift the content of that study into a direction, directing the PUC to go do that, or asking the legislature that directed POC to go do that. Again, I may be mischaracterizing what Michelle and June in particular were trying to say on that. But I want to do a quick, yes, let's make this change. And again, the change, I don't have actual language here, but essentially the change is to say, shift the content of the study away from the Climate Council recommends the following study to the Climate Council recommends the PUC be directed to look at these issues around biomass. Michelle, June, who you, the two of you were both articulate in this. Is that a fair characterization that the Climate Council directs, asks that the legislature direct the PUC to look at these issues as it's reviewing biomass?
Yeah, that was.
Is that fair?
That is fair, yes.
Okay,
Although to be
great.
clear, it's not my idea, it's Michelle's. I'm throwing her under the bus.
Yeah. It's all good. It's all good. It's all good. Okay. So in the chat now, folks, a yes means yes, let's make this change where essentially we're saying this isn't a study of the Climate Council, this is a study that we're asking the PUC to do via the legislature doing the PUC to do, or no, let's keep it the way it is. The council needs to be asking for this study. All right. So yes means let's go down this road of turning this sort of into a PUC thing. No means let's keep the document the way it is. Recommendation 1 the way it is. It's a council thing. We're looking for a council study. Thanks everyone for doing this. I'll just let the chat happen for a little bit. Anyone need a little more time? There we go. Okay, I'm just eyeballing this, but we could do more precise, but I'm seeing the no's taking the day on this. I see 3 yeses. Okay, any last folks who haven't weighed in the chat who want to? Okay, great. So that's a no. Okay, so even with Ryan's last minute vote there, I think we're still at a place where the no's are clearly the preponderance of interest right now. Okay, super. Next, there was a request to add language in this document that would specifically ask the administration and or legislature to ensure that this study is funded. Again, let's do a quick in the chat. A yes is yes, let's add specific language in here that's asked the administration and legislature to please find the resources to do this work. A no is no, it's not appropriate for us to put this language in here. Hang on just one second. Then Julie, do you want to say something before we do this?
I do. I mean, I think somehow we've got to have a sense of prioritization in here. And I don't know that making this recommendation in a vacuum is actually helpful or even likely reflective of overall council priorities. There's going to be discussion, assuming we can get to it later on the agenda, about a transportation study. And I'm just worried about suggesting this as a recommendation absent understanding what the order of prioritization is from the council.
Interesting. Okay. So David, go ahead. And then, yeah, I guess we need a little conversation about this. All right. Let's have a
Well,
little
if in fact we are going to, how would you say, recognize that there are competing interests, studies and other work that needs to be done for the available funds, then the least we should say, since we the council has spent so much time on this, is that this should be part of a list of the topics, issues, work products. This should be on the list when it is determined what the priorities for available funding is. In other words, I don't want imperfect information about whether or not money is available to make this disappear entirely as people make decisions about priority studies. I think this one's pretty important. This is a big deal. So I, in the long run, am arguing that some of the study money should be used for it, or we should ask the legislature to provide additional funding, or ask the administration to find funding within existing accounts to be able to do this.
Okay,
But
so it's
it
important for you
shouldn't
to
disappear.
Yeah.
It should be part of a mix, if that's what people want to do, be part of the mix of where the money is spent.
So David, the way you would write that line, you would actually write it that says, you know, the council asked that this study be among the priority studies that are considered, you know, for funding in the next, period of time, whatever. Something like that. Wait, you're on mute. You're still on mute. It's okay.
I don't want it to disappear because at this moment in time, we end up being convinced that there's not enough money to do it.
Right. Thanks. That's helpful. Joey?
Again, I take Secretary Moore's point, and not knowing the other things that this is competing against. I just wonder if, like, we can just say this, an independent analysis in collaboration with the Climate Action Office and for the Climate Council will require additional funding. The legislature and the administration should seek any potential federal revenues. There's tons of money out there right now that could potentially do this work. So just noting that it would require funding, and it is, and then underscoring to David's point, this is a high priority. But these are all just recommendations. I think we should just acknowledge it needs more resources for an independent analysis. That analysis should be in partnership with the Climate Action Office and in service of the council and the state of Vermont. And we could work on some language, but I think that's really important just to underscore.
Thanks, Joey. That's helpful. So just to be clear, I always like to be very specific about what we're saying. I wonder, just hearing from the last two folks, what we're saying is there's a line that says, essentially, the council notes this will require funding and that this is a high priority for the council. Something like that? Joey and David?
As long as it doesn't disappear.
Okay. So,
I guess it would be helpful just having, like, ask the legislature and the administration to, and others to help look for potential federal funding resources to support such an analysis.
I wouldn't exclude private sources either.
okay. So encourage the legislature and administration to find potential sources. Okay. Is any other comment we need to say before we do a quick check on this? Okay. So this is, I'm going to drop this in the chat. This isn't maybe the most refined English, but it's what I'm trying to synthesize from what I'm hearing, that this is the decision point. Okay, so this is what I wrote and trying to synthesize you all. Is that not hitting it, David?
That hits it.
It hits it. Okay. So the council knows this will require funding. This is a high priority for the council. The council encourages, like, we'll get the like English right, but the council encourages the legislature, the administration to find potential sources. Something like that. Okay. Now I want to lift up what Secretary Moore said, which is, is the council really ready to say that this is a high priority? So this is what this little moment right now is, as a, checking, putting this language in the document is to check if that kind of language works, right? With a cleaned up second sentence that's plain English. So if folks feel ready to it, I would like to do a quick chat, temperature check as we've been doing. The yes is yes, include this language. The no is no, don't include language like this. We're not ready to put language like this in. Thanks, David, for kicking it off. I'd encourage all counselors to drop in the chat, yes, include language like this, or no, we're not ready to include language like this. Okay, great. Julie said yes, so I guess the concern was addressed. Okay, super. All right, so that was easy-ish. Let's move on to the next one. The next one is the specific additional details that you would want to make sure go into this document for the study, knowing that their next steps on terms of reference for the consultant, et cetera, et cetera. So, but the one that I've captured so far is the one about need to look at the impacts on soil erosion and resilience to flooding, as well as other ecosystem services that may be affected. That's one thing we can do a quick chat vote on. Is there anything else that we need to absolutely right now put in the language of this document around the content of the study that hasn't already been said? Okay. All right, so let's test this one. So, yeah, I just want to be really clear, like to Rich's point in the chat on the high, like you were voting on the high priority as the sentence. I really don't want to go back and re-vote it without that word high. So unless there's like a groundswell of concern, a majority of people said yes to the sentence. So I think it's going to be left as you voted on it in the chat. And I apologize. If folks really want to re-vote it without the word high, I'm open to that, but I'm kind of moving forward now. So in terms of the content of the study, this would be the language, something like along these lines that you'd want to add in to the content of the study. Need to look at the impact on soil, erosion, and resilience to flooding from from harvesting, as well as other ecosystem services that might be affected. Something like that. And open to friendly amendments to that language, because that's just me trying to do it fast with y'all. Paula?
I like the language. I just wonder, do we know where it's going to go?
In the document?
Yeah.
No, but
Okay.
we can
Well,
look.
yeah, but yeah, I think maybe under there's a part about forest health and resilience, I believe.
Yeah, there's
Is that where it goes?
forest health
Yeah.
and resilience. That would be a great place to put it, right?
Yeah. Just trying to see. Yep. Yeah, that sounds great.
Right. So this would be under the main bullet of what would be the implications for forest health and resilience.
Cool.
Right.
Love it. Thank you.
Okay. Reframe is, yeah, Leslie Ann, I want to get this right from your perspective, because you know you'll catch foolish things that I do. Frame is ecosystem services based approach. Can you read off to me, Leslie Ann, the way you would do it?
So
So I get it right.
Yeah, I put it in the chat that I would reframe it to being an ecosystem, comma, systems-based approach to forest health and resilience. And that way we're capturing all elements of the landscape and not listing out maybe 4 or 5 and then missing 3 or 8 others. So if we sort of capture it as a big frame, then we'll make sure that we're trying to hit all those points in there.
So reframe it ecosystem, comma, systems-based approach to forest health. Okay. Ecosystem, systems-based approach. Okay. Okay. So with the friendly amendment from Leslie Ann, I can put that back in the chat. I'm not sure I'm doing this exactly what you thought. Leslie Ann, help me out if I'm, again.
Well, it looks like people are already voting in the chat anyway. They're putting
People are doing
yes,
thumbs up to your thing. Yeah. People really like what you said. Let me just make sure I can get it in a sentence. Is it okay to leave in the first part, right? The sort of specific mention, soil erosion resilience, and more broadly, an ecosystem systems-based approach to forest health and resilience?
Oh, what I was suggesting was to replace that first piece. So just say need to use a systems-based, an ecosystem system-based approach to forest health and resilience.
And not mention the soil and the erosion and the stuff like that?
Was it Ali or Jael who had brought up the soil erosion and
It
the
was,
flooding?
well, yeah, I mean, do people understand that ecosystems include soil ecosystems and soil health? I guess.
Can we do a such as, right? Can we
Yeah.
do a need to
I
use an
think the
ecosystem?
literati understands, but maybe not everybody.
Yeah.
So if you
Well,
want to
how about
shift
we do
that
a
to
such
the
as?
end,
Yeah. Resilience.
Jael, would you be okay with that? Shifting it to the end?
Yeah, such as or and is fine.
So I'm just, give me 1 second. I'll throw it back in the chat. How's that? Such as looking at, maybe it's a little bit more, a little better English there, but something like that. Does that look, am I getting it? Okay. Does that work,
Can
Leslie?
it's a little more than soil erosion. It's protecting forest soils from the impact, compaction from forest, from logging. There's a lot more to it than just the erosion aspect.
Okay.
It's soil health in general, and those soil health principles of
Yeah, but
keeping roots
isn't that
intact.
forest health?
Can I suggest, folks, we don't go too much further down this road, because we can really get this right in the RFP and the TORs. I think we just want to get the real gist of this. So if we get the ecosystem system-based approach, and then we put in soil health, erosion, resilience to flooding, I think we're sending all the signals you want to send as a council. Does that work? Yeah, Jill? Okay, let's do a quick chat vote on that. So what we're doing is we're adding this as a line to the kinds of things we want to see studied. So could folks put in the chat, yes, add this, or no, don't add this? Thanks, folks, for doing that. Okay. Great. Super. All right. We're almost there, folks. Very, very close. So the last thing is anything we want to do to that last mention on life cycle analysis. And I don't have a specific proposal. It may be in the chat that I missed it. This is something that we could really get wrapped around, folks. So I want to be very cautious. Like if there's something specific we want to make a change on right now, let's do it. Otherwise, let's move to see if we can just approve the whole document. Joey?
I definitely don't want us to get wrapped around an axle. I might be just not understanding what that last sentence means. It's the way it reads is a little confusing to me. I thought if the general goal is that a life cycle greenhouse gas emissions analysis, which is a complement to our existing greenhouse gas emissions inventory, we recommend overlaying this analysis or being a resource to undergird this analysis. That's what I would hope for. And I took a stab, but I don't know if that was the intent. I was confused by the way it was written. So I don't want to undermine anyone else's intent if I'm misunderstanding it, but my hope would be that the recommendation is that we lean into a life cycle greenhouse gas emissions analysis for this examination to have an apples to apples comparison of what we're talking about. Here's my intent. And if I'm wrong, please tell.
No, I can just, that last line simply exists to acknowledge the biomass task group's recommendations and to sort of update that those recommendations are being followed in the life cycle analysis.
Yeah, it had no greater purpose than just to say the task group made some recommendations about the analysis. That's how it's happening, to the best of our knowledge. But again, it's not really a recommendation to anybody. It's more of a, like almost like a footnote. So if you want to make it more into a recommendation, then yeah, Joey, you're gonna have, I think, put something out there that's like, actually, we want to say something about this. Because right now we're not really saying anything. We're just saying, we heard you, we understand it's happening.
I guess I don't need to spend too much time here. My assumption is because we are moving forward with a life cycle greenhouse gas emissions analysis in general, that work is happening at the Agency of Natural Resources. And Jane said that's likely to culminate probably early springish, that should just inform like our council's work, the state of Vermont's work in general. So maybe it's implied, but not explicit. So I was just trying to make it explicit, but as I said, mostly I didn't really understand. So it was helpful context to hear what it was intended to do. So I don't need to spend more time, but I think life cycle analysis is very important to have a full and fair view.
Right. So this is great. And I'll go to Paula, your hand in just one second, but my sense is what you're saying, Joey, is like, turn this away from being just like we heard you task group, the analysis is happening, to a place that's saying, as a council, we think the life cycle analysis that's going to come out soon will be helpful, right, in doing this work. That's kind of what you're saying. And so it's more a statement from the council saying, we're looking forward to this. We think it will be helpful. Is that what you're trying to do, Joey?
Yes.
Okay.
But I don't want to give short shrift to all the work that the task group has done. So I'm not trying to, yeah.
That's fine. Yeah. Paula?
I'm just finding like basically like grammatically parsing what this means is a problem, because we just had a whole like 2 recommendations and then we say the recommendations and I can't tell which thing we're talking about, which set of recommendations. And then also it's, as Joey is saying, like it's completely unclear what we think about those recommendations. Like, either take it out or like make it mean something.
Totally. Yep. It refers to recommendations of the biomass task group that's not even mentioned in this document, not listed in this document, right? So it has some structural problems. Yeah. Rich?
Well, I have the same reaction as Paula, and I was going to ask Bram, do we need this? The study is underway. We haven't seen it yet. We hope that it's being done in a way that's consistent with the recommendations of the task group, and we believe it may be so, but we haven't seen it yet. I need some help from Bram as to whether this is needed in some way to thank the task group for making those recommendations and the administration for pursuing the study.
You know, I think it's not needed. I think it is an artifact of our basing this document on the previous one. And the previous one had those recommendations that we didn't just want to scrap, although they had been implemented and were underway. But I think we could, as David says, if there would be less turbulence without them, it's not a recommendation. It's not adding anything substantive. So I think move to strike the last 3 lines of this document.
Yeah. So great. So one option is to strike it. Another option is to strike and replace it with something along the lines of what Joey just wrote, right? So let's take those two in order. Maybe we'll do an ABC kind of thing, but hang on one second. I'm just trying to, Joey, take your recommendations and make a version that might fit in like language here. So just give me 1 second and I'll drop it in the chat and see if that works for you, Joey, and others, and then we can decide if that's worth adding. So Joey, look at this real quick, and everybody, counselors. This could be a sort of parting phrase of saying, hey, we know this stuff's going on, or it could be put up at the top. Notes there's an ongoing greenhouse gas emissions analysis coming from the Agency National Resource that can serve as a foundation for having the most comprehensive, accurate understanding of greenhouse gas reductions from biomass. Yep. Did I mess that up, Joey?
No, I take that as a friendly amendment. And again, I don't need to spend too much time because I feel like this is implicit. This seemed important to make explicit, but well, however people want to roll, I bet you're a little fried. So happy to hunt too.
Let me just do a quick temperature check on scrapping the line we have in the document right now and replacing it with this. And then I'm going to do another, if that fails for some reason, I'm going to do another one that's just scrap it and don't replace with anything. So let's do a quick check. Scrap the line in the document right now that mentions this and replace it with what Joey just said. So a yes is yes, let's scrap and replace. A no is no, I don't want to scrap and replace. Thanks, folks, for doing this. So I'm feeling like the no's are taking it right now based on my count. There is, keep voting, folks. Who hasn't dropped a yes or no in the chat? And then a change vote. Yes. Okay. All right. So I think the scrap and replace did not prosper. I want to do just a quick check then on removing Bram's sort of motion to remove this. So let's stop what we were just doing in terms of the scrap and replace in the chat. And I'm going to ask all counselors one last thing. Here we go before we do the whole document, which is, would you like to take out that last sentence because it's not really doing anything that feels meaningful for you here? So the specific motion is to take it away, although hang on, wait, don't do it. Paolo, what did you want to say?
I'm just wondering, is it just the last sentences or the two last sentences?
Bram, what were you thinking?
The two last sentences.
Yes. I think that's the most sort of logical thing. If you're going to get rid of it, you got to get rid of the whole thing. Yeah. So I'm going to ask folks again, thanks for doing this in the chat. I really appreciate this. It's tricky on Zoom, but in the chat, could you just kindly say, yes, remove, right? Yes, remove that last paragraph, or no, leave it in.
Would you
Is
mind
it
putting it
possible
back
for,
up?
yeah, I was gonna say, putting it back up on the screen?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Leslie Ann and I have the
Absolutely.
same
Okay,
question, I think.
hang on. Let me get the version that's as it is right now. Give me 1 second. Okay, you should be able to see that. It's this very last sentence here. Finally, the biomass task group included recommendations, blah, 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 blah. The recommendations are consistent with the way the study is being carried out. That's what we're suggesting. Remove that. And so the voting that's happening in the chat right now is yes, remove, or no, keep it.
And it's the last two sentences, David. You said last sentence, but
Sentences, yeah, sorry. Last paragraph. Thank you, Bram. Yeah. Folks, if you haven't dropped a thought in the chat, right now is your moment. Okay, I'm calling it. I'm saying that it's being requested to remove. Oops. Well, let me just let it roll out for a second more. Yeah, I don't want to fix it. I want to either remove it or leave it. We don't have time to fix it right now. David, quick comment, and then let's move on.
This statement underwrites a great deal of what is in this document. It was a constant question through the writing process to the secretary, who kept us informed of what that study would do. And some of the, anyhow,
Okay.
it was part
I
of
hear your
writing
pain,
this
David.
report.
I hear your pain. I think there's an interest from the council to just remove it from this document. And certainly it can be part of the way you talk about this in the context of how this document was produced.
Well, I was thinking about making a motion to reconsider, but I'll pass on that.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Okay, folks, based on the chat, we're gonna take this last piece out. And we're really down to the end of the wire here and being able to sort of say, once we take that out, we've made a bunch of changes. It's time to say, are we okay? Can we live with this document coming out in your name as a council? Joey?
I'm sorry, I don't mean to belabor it. I wouldn't have raised I just didn't. It's, if you said something like the recommendations outlined above are consistent with the way the study should be carried out. As an English major, I read that sentence and that last sentence, and I didn't know what it meant exactly. It wasn't clear. So I just was looking for clarity.
Yeah.
So I didn't mean to jettison the whole thing. I think David's point is real. I'm fine to move forward whatever way, but the sentence is awkward reading to me.
Yeah. And just for clarity, what it was saying was the recommendations that came from the task group, which were not written in this document here, right, are in line. So it wasn't even recommendations in this document. So there's a lot of poor clarity in the writing of that. So I'm gonna, in the interest of respecting what you all said in the chat, I'm gonna move on to say we're removing that. And so let's review what we've done and now what this document looks like, and let's make a decision on the document. Okay. So I'll put my screen back up. So what we've done to the document is the following. We've kept the benefits and cost section, but we've made 2 changes to the benefits section to reflect concerns, right? We've taken a suggestion to change recommendation number 2 to a wording that you see on your screen right now, which is a recommendation about what the PUC should be doing. And the way it's respecting the concerns expressed in this document and the results of the study. We talked about making a shift on recommendation 1 and we decided against it. We talked about including language around finding funding, and we agreed to do that with that language. We added this additional line to the document about details of the study to look at ecosystem system-based approach, and we make a specific shout out to soil health, erosion, and resilience to flooding. And we just talked about making changes to life cycle analysis, and we said, no, we're actually removing the paragraph. Okay, that's what we've done. And we've gotten pretty much to the end of our time for deliberation in making changes. And so now what we need to do is make a decision on the document with these changes in it. And I'm not going to try to show you the document with all these changes because I'm just not that good to do it in real time. So what you have to do is make hold me and everybody else accountable that we will be extremely faithful to doing these changes exactly as you have said you want them. And what you're approving now is the document with these changes made in them. Okay? So let me stop sharing, or is it helpful to me to keep sharing? Does anybody want me to keep this up for a second while they're thinking about this? Is this helpful? Okay. So here we go. Let's do this. I'm going to stop sharing for a second. In the chat, I'm going to ask you, hopefully the last time today on this chat thing, do you, as counselors, yes, this report is good to go. Let's finalize it with these changes and send it on as our recommendation, or no, I'm not comfortable sending it on. This doesn't make the cut for me. I'm a no. So could you please in the chat do a yes or a no to this document as your biomass recommendations document coming out of the council? And this is our sort of final vote today on this. And we'll do it in the chat. Thanks, folks. Thanks, everyone, for dropping in the chat. We will do yeah, we're not going to do a final public comment around this vote right now, though we will do some quick comments on the back end here. Okay, I'm seeing yeses in the chat. And so that, to me, is an affirmation that you're ready to go with these amendments, these changes to the document. And I thank you all for slogging through that and trying to be thoughtful as a council. So now we've got a real pickle, right? We're 10 minutes from close-up time, right? There's a bunch of stuff that we wanted to do. We wanted to hear from transportation. We wanted to see the legislation report. We want to do a bunch of stuff. So we need to stop at 2 because we're going to lose a lot of folks at 2. So my sense is we're going to need to extend our January meeting to be able to address these issues. And so this is one of these tricky process things, but I just want to know you made a big step forward with this biomass piece, right? And we have 2 January meetings. So yeah, let me walk this through. We have an early January meeting where we were gonna make some final decisions around the transportation piece and make some final decisions around the legislative report. And just do some quick business like that. And then we have an in-person all-day thing later in January to really dive in to the planning and the work around the update of the climate action plan. So we have these 2 meetings in January. My suggestion is that we end on time today. We push the remaining items to those meetings. We encourage all counselors to look at the written material that came out, because that's a way of really coming prepared to that January meeting. And I'll just defer to Jane here, who is has a comment on timing.
I just want to make one comment about challenge. The legislative report is due to the legislature on January 15th. And so the way that the council approved moving forward with support around documents like the legislative report or recommendations is you see them once and you comment, and then a final document is brought forward. So that won't work now with January 8th. So I just want to note for consideration that the steering committee will have to just sort of discuss how we deal with that, because there's a challenge with the timeline specifically around the legislative report.
Right. That is the one that's really driving a timing thing. Right. Okay. David, and then we need to make some decisions so we end on time.
And maybe it's my ears are tired after these hours, and I didn't hear, but we owe the speaker a letter.
In that
And I
too.
don't, that's part of January's activities also.
Yes.
Since we should have been putting it out today.
Yeah, absolutely. So those 3 things, substantive things, are really important. The transportation, the response to the speaker's letter on resilience, and then the legislative report. Those are 3 things we'd hope to get through today. We didn't. And so your options are to pick those back up in your January meeting and extend that meeting. If you want to schedule an additional meeting to go through that, you're welcome to do that as well. Or probably the sanest thing to do is turn this over to the steering committee, which is charged with making sure the process is working for everyone, and let them make some decisions about how to deal with the fact that we ran over today. All right. So my suggestion would be that final thing where I think the steering committee is the right body to sort of sort this out. If we need to schedule another meeting, extend a meeting, make sure we're giving time to all these things that need to happen and have some time piece. Okay. If folks are comfortable with that, we had also talked about having some additional public comment at the end. I'm seeing that sort of happen in the chat in real time. I want to just make sure that we are clear on at least our next steps as a council. And if we need to, we can open up a little time for public comment if folks want to. So our next steps as a council are going to be working with the steering committee to schedule up the pieces that we didn't get to today and make sure that they get the time that they deserve. And then we will definitely see each other in January, at least twice. And I really look forward to our in-person session in particular in late January to start putting our heads into the work ahead and a very successful update of the climate action plan. Any other quick reflections from counselors about the pathway ahead and the kinds of things the steering committee should pay attention to as it's solving our particular pickle here of running out of time today? Anything counselors want to say?
When's the in-person January meeting?
It's in your calendars. It's like the 29th or something like that. Hang on, don't let me miss it. 29th. You should have a calendar invite with a location.
Yeah, no, I'm sure it's there.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. In our agenda, we had talked about having a short amount of public comment. That was really to be about the additional items, not additional work around the biomass item. We did not get to additional items. If folks are feeling that they have public comment they absolutely need to make right now, we can open up that space. Before I do, I want to check in with Jane.
I actually have a public comment to make on behalf of a member of the public who had to leave early.
Okay, great.
Do it now?
Yeah, now's a great time.
Sure. So Annette Smith had to leave early and asked that for a future update from the Climate Action Office, she's interested in asking the council to advise the Climate Action Office to provide an accounting of how much money has been spent and where with the passage of the GWSA, the creation and the activities of the Climate Council, the Office of Climate, the Clean Heat Standard, and any expenses that have flowed from the GWSA.
Okay. Thanks, Annette. So let me open this up. Again, I'm just going to say we're going to lose a lot of folks at 2 o'clock. So again, we'll try to keep some time on this. But if there's any additional comment, public comment from folks on the back end of our conversation today, now's a good time to do it. You're welcome to do it in the chat or verbally.
Jane, that request for financial information, you'll be preparing that for budget adjustment anyhow, right?
No, not the way she's referenced it. So.
Okay, thanks. Anything else from a public comment standpoint? Anyone else who would like to drop something in the chat or say something before we finish up today's conversation?
I would.
Yeah, Nick, go ahead.
Yeah, this has been a frustrating process for me because I feel like it's the council's role to make recommendations on climate matters, how we're going to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. And you had a recommendation from a subcommittee after they heard experts. You chose not to follow it. I recognize that's your prerogative. That's fine. But now you've set up a process where you're not going to be making any recommendation at all. I mean, this document as written said there was going to be a study, and then the council would reevaluate the issues after the study. Now you're not even doing this. I mean, it seems to me like you should be, after you get the study, making a recommendation, and you're not doing that. I just don't understand.
Thanks, Nick. I appreciate that insight. Anything else folks need to share? Counselors, any final reflections as we finish up today? Paula? Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to say, like, I've heard a lot of public comments around this and agreed with most of them. I feel like rhetorically sometimes they go a little overboard. But you know, the spirit is definitely appreciated. And yeah, it'd be nice if they could be toned down a little bit, I guess.
Thanks, Paula. Yeah. All right, folks. We'll see you in January. Steering committee will figure out how to make sure we invest the time we need to invest in the topics we didn't get to today and do that in a timely fashion. I really appreciate everybody doing this on Zoom and working through a really tricky issue that is very tough. And so thanks everyone for doing that. Thanks everyone who joined us and invested your time to provide input into the council's process. That is valuable. So take care, everybody. We won't probably see you, so happy holidays. Take a break, rejuvenate. We'll see you back in January. And thanks for everyone for everything you did today. Take care.
Thank you, David.
Bye. Thanks, everyone.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
Thank you.